Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto trained before Academy Sasuke bashing. Before I start, please support for more amazing content and do consider subscribing to my channel and share this video with your friends. This is written by StoryTelleroftheMist, link in the description and support writer. Let's start the video. Academy. Team Selection Day. Naruto smirked as he looked at the tied-up form of Sasuke at his feet. Smiling, he formed the seals of the transformation jutsu and turned into an exact copy of the jerk. He'd done it. He beat the bastard and now all he had to do was show Sakura-chan how awesome he was. He opened the window and moved out quietly. Soon he was down to the ground and ran towards where he knew Sakura generally had her lunch. Streets of Konoha. Sometime later, Sakura huffed angrily as she worked her way from the academy. Today had not been a good day in the end. She had been the happiest in her life when Iruka-sensei had announced that she was the only kunoichi in the entire grade to have made it onto a team with Sasuke. Take that, no pig. True love conquers all. But nothing other than that had gone according to her plan after that. Sasuke had been too shy to even consider having lunch with her and had run off. Then their teacher had arrived for the meeting 4 hours later than the scheduled time, only to inform them that they weren't really genin yet and would have to pass his own test for them to be accepted as ninja of the village. She had tried to ask Sasuke out for some evening tea or even dinner, as both of them were the best test takers in the entire batch, and she was sure that he would at least say yes if for nothing, then to talk about the test and maybe revise a few things from the academy to help them tomorrow. She thought that she had almost succeeded too until the idiot Naruto had intervened and Sasuke had disappeared from her sight. How she hated that idiot. Couldn't he get a clue she wasn't interested in him in the slightest? She was sure that if the idiot had not been so annoying, then she could have at least managed to get Sasuke to revise the syllabus with her over tea in the least. To top it all off, not only had the idiot taken Sasuke's first kiss. Later he had disguised himself as Sasuke of all people and attempted to kiss her. A nuisance. Her mother was right, he was just a damn nuisance. At that moment Sakura made a split-second decision that would change the fate of the elemental nations for generations to come. After all, she thought, he was always going around pranking people around the village, so I'll just give him a little payback for trying to trick me. Now she just had to figure where he lived. With Naruto. Nighttime. Naruto slurped the remnants of the last bowl, just a third for tonight, before he paid his tab at Ichiraku and moved towards his house. He was so happy that he was on a team with Sakura-chan, but Iruka-sensei had pulled a fast one on him by putting in Sasuke too. Why couldn't Iruka-sensei just see how awesome a ninja he was? He didn't need the jerk on his team to bayo. Walking along, he thought about what kind of test Kakashi-sensei would have for them tomorrow. No matter what, he'd show everyone he was the best to bayo. And then he'd beat the bastard and Sakura-chan would see how awesome he was and love him. He finally reached his apartment and opened the door, only to be sprayed with a pile of what seemed to be half-cooked ramen as he took the first step inside. Ooh. Naruto opened his eyes slowly to see that he was covered from head to toe in noodles and soup. He fell to his knees as he looked at his precious rations for the week. Poor ramen, now all he had was a bit of rice in the pantry and he wasn't sure whether it was still there or not. The rats tended to be rather nasty. Suddenly the prospect of not having breakfast seemed much better now that he couldn't have any even if he wanted. Naruto just hoped that his sensei would take them on a cool mission to rescue a princess or capture some bandits and he'd get paid for it. He really needed money now. Ramen was not cheap. Plus tomorrow was rent day and he just had enough to cover for rent and one morning run for milk before he ran out completely. He picked off a few noodles from his jacket, the soup ran down his body frame and was now uncomfortably seeping between his feet and the sandals. Truly this was not his day. Knock, who could it be at this time? Did old man Hokage come to visit? Naruto opened the door, the gruff face in the hallway sadly belonged to the landlord and not the kind old man he had been hoping for. What are you doing in here? The landlord asked, his voice underlying annoyance at having to talk to this thing that the Hokage had thrust onto his property. That was the only time he had regretted agreeing to manage a property on shinobi lease terms. You're supposed to keep the property clean, the landlord spoke, so clean up this mess. Naruto scowled a little, he did not need to be told this. Sure, he didn't keep everything neatly, but he didn't keep his house dirty. Also today is rent day, so make it fast. Naruto gave the man a surprised look before glancing at the calendar, today was actually rent day. Yeah, I'll get it, Naruto spoke, he moved into the kitchen and put his hand behind the fridge. Now that he thought about it, maybe even milk was out of his range once he paid rent today. Soon his grasping had caught hold of his dear Gama-chan. This feels a bit lighter than yesterday, Naruto thought as he opened the clasp to find that only a single ryu and a slip of paper inside. Naruto hesitantly opened the paper to find a drawing of a face giving him a raspberry. So someone broke into his apartment, wasted all his ramen and took off with his savings. Naruto's shoulders dropped, he barely had any money on him after paying for dinner and without his savings, he didn't have enough to cover his rent. He hoped that the landlord would understand. Naruto's hopes were dashed quite swiftly when the landlord refused to give him any concessions. Naruto had tried to argue that now that he was a ninja he could go on missions and he'd pay the rent by the next week, and that the only reason he didn't have any money was because someone had broken in and taken all his savings. But the landlord would have none of it. For the first time in years Satoshi Kojiro saw hope at the end of the tunnel. He could finally have the thing out of his property. No one could question him for kicking out a tenant unable to pay rent, and therefore he had no fear of the Hokage butting in to advocate for the boy either. He should really thank the pink-haired girl he saw getting into the apartment earlier. She may not have known about the thing's status considering how young she was, but she had unknowingly solved a problem which had plagued him for years. He would ensure that no break-in was reported to police. He could do that much for her. So half an hour later Naruto found himself on the street, still covered in soup and looking at the window of what used to be his home. Halfway across Konoha a pink-haired Jen encountered the Ryu in her hand. The idiot deserved it for ruining her day. The money wasn't a lot, but it would probably be enough to cover for a new dress. Now that she thought about it, Sasuke-kun always wore blue, so maybe he liked that color. Naruto walked around the village as he saw lights go out of different houses. He felt really icky from all the dried soup in his clothes and really felt like taking a shower and sleeping in his bed. Too bad neither of them were a possibility at this time. The landlord had not even given him time enough to grab his stuff and told him to leave immediately. So currently he was dirty, had no clothes or supplies and was out on the street. He thought about going to the old man Hokage to ask for a loan, but it was too late and he would probably be asleep. It was at times like these that Naruto really doubted himself. In the past he had asked himself the reasoning for such behavior by other people, only to be given vague answers by the Hokage. That had been until Mizuki happened and Naruto came to know why everyone in the village seemed to treat him like dirt. For once, Naruto felt angry as he glanced at the Hokage monument and looked at the face of the fourth Hokage. He was the reason everything bad happened to Naruto. He was the one that sealed the fox inside his stomach and condemned him to this life. If he didn't exist Naruto would have been much happier. But then suddenly something snapped him back, the dark trail of thoughts was gone and Naruto was back to his normal self. Shaking his head, Naruto cleared his mind. The fourth had fulfilled his duty as the Hokage, he had saved the village and paid for it with his life. He was a hero to everyone in the village including Naruto. But for one, Naruto wondered why the fourth chose him. Was it just easy to pick a no-name orphan? Did his parents object when he was taken, or did they give him to the fourth in order to protect the village? Were they ninja? Did they love him? Were they still alive? Countless rounds of questioning with the Hokage had yielded no result. He was just told that they were great ninja who perished fighting the Nine Tails, but he was never given a name. Even his surname Uzumaki was said to have been given in honor of some old ally of the village. Naruto continued to ponder on the questions until he was out of the main residential area of the village. Slowly it began to dawn on him that he needed to sleep soon or he would be late for his test tomorrow. Considering the fact that it was already late, Naruto decided to just sleep at the training ground itself. He washed his jacket at a nearby stream and then plopped himself under a tree and dozed off. Next morning, Sasuke muttered a few curses under his breath as he made his way to the training ground. It was not that Sasuke was not an early riser, he woke up early every day for his training, but a reporting time of 5:00 am in the morning was still too early for him. He arrived at the training ground a good 10 minutes before the allotted time to find the dobe snoring against a tree trunk, his ridiculous orange jacket slung on a nearby branch. What kind of an idiot sleeps before a test, Sasuke thought. He was of the mind to awaken Naruto as they had little time before Kakashi showed up but shrugged the thought aside. If the dobe slept through the test and failed, it would be his fault alone. Plus losing the deadweight would only be beneficial in the long run. Soon enough Sakura walked towards them with lidded eyes. For once she did not move next to Sasuke and greet him and instead opted to sit next to a tree near her crush. She seemed to lack her usual energy and was currently glaring at the blonde who was peacefully snoring next to them. I'm not going to wake him up, she thought. She tried to stay awake herself, but she had never really been a morning person and soon enough sleep claimed her. Idiots was all Sasuke thought. I guess I'll be the only one passing today. Training ground. 9:45 am. Sasuke for his part was seething with rage. He had been waiting since 5:00 am for Kakashi and unlike his teammates, he had not taken the luxury to take a nap. Sakura had woken up an hour ago, embarrassed at having fallen asleep in front of Sasuke. She had attempted to greet him and talk about the test, but her efforts had been rebuffed as usual. Naruto for his part had woken up about 10 minutes ago and was currently washing his face at a nearby stream. Finally, 5 hours after the designated time their teacher decided to show up and inform them about the bell test. Training ground. Evening. Naruto struggled against his bindings. This was really not funny. Not at all. In the end, he had been tied to a stump and had to be fed by Sasuke of all people. They had managed to pass the test in the end, but his teammates and teacher had conveniently forgotten about him being tied to a post when they had learned about the result. The process of getting free of the bindings had been long and painful, but in the end he had somehow managed to get free. Cutting off the remaining ropes, he had instinctively started moving towards Ichiraku before realizing that what little money he had wouldn't be enough for even one bowl of miso. He couldn't use his emergency ration as his apartment was no longer his. Naruto's stomach growled. The day sucks, Naruto thought. He had no food and had little idea of where he could get any. Sure, old man Tucci would feed him for free, but Naruto was determined to not burden the guy any more than he already had since his childhood. Plus he was now a ninja, he had to learn to endure like Iruka-sensei said. A raindrop fell on his cheek, rousing him from his thoughts. Alright, today royally sucks, Naruto thought as he started running. He couldn't really go to his old apartment, and it was really unlikely that he would be allowed to take shelter under a shed by anyone. Naruto thought about going to Iruka-sensei, surely his old teacher could let him bunk for one night before he could go on a mission and get paid. But unfortunately Naruto had no idea where his academy instructor lived, the same was the case with his teammates and majority of his classmates. I could still go there, Naruto thought. He was a bit unsure, but the worsening weather made the decision for him. He only had the clothes he was currently wearing, and if they got soaked, he wouldn't have anything to wear at all. There in Naruto's thoughts was an abandoned building in an enclosed compound Naruto had used for hiding a few years ago. It had been his go-to place for storing pranking supplies and otherwise hiding when he was feeling particularly low. It was a pretty standard but old two-storied house in a compound on the outskirts of the village. The compound had a much bigger house on the other side, which was owned by an old lady who sometimes stayed in the village. Nobody really ever came near that abandoned building, and it had been a perfect getaway for the boy before he had been given his apartment by the Hokage. Naruto ran as fast as he could and made it to the compound. Recalling from his earlier nightly visits, he moved a big rock near the wall and was glad to find that the tunnel he had constructed years ago was still mostly intact. He crawled through, grimacing as he had originally not dug it with his current size in mind, but ultimately got through. Once inside, he pulled a rag he had found near the training ground over his body and jumped into the canopy before rushing to his destination. Once outside the building, Naruto crawled to the first floor and reached to a window, his usual entry point in the earlier days, and pressed at a spot where he knew that the wood had been tender. Click. Mission success, Naruto smiled as he slid the window open and quietly made his way inside, closing the window behind him. The place was just as he remembered from a few years ago, cold, dark and dusty. But anything beats soaking out in the rain, so he'd take it. Moving downstairs, Naruto made his way to the kitchen. He opened a cabinet and slowly raised the bottom to reveal his safe as had been. He was pleased to see that almost everything he hid here was still intact. The cool cloak he had once snatched from the Hokage's office, a few tools for pranks, a set of blunt kunai and shuriken, some ninja wire and a lot of other things. But most importantly, it contained something Naruto had preserved as a treasure during his younger years, a jar of honey. Naruto distinctly remembered he had once slid into a bakery. The guy at the counter didn't know him, so he had been able to purchase a honey toast on that day. Naruto had loved it and purchased it every day until a mean old lady replaced the guy and he was shooed away from the shop. Buying honey by itself had been ridiculously expensive, at least for him, so he had taken a more roundabout and riskier route. He had overheard a boy in class talk about how his father raised bees for honey and how awesome it was to get some yourself. Naruto for his part had understood that he just needed to raid a hive and he would get honey, so with a kunai in hand, he had stabbed the first honeycomb he came across. Alas, no one told him about how badly the bees stung. At the end of the day, Naruto managed to get enough to fill a small jar and had preserved the sweet treat for a special occasion. Well, he became a genin today, so that counted as special. Plus Iruka-sensei said that honey never went bad, so he could probably eat it. Naruto opened the jar, he put his forefinger inside and savored his first meal for the day. By the gods, this thing was like the ramen of sweets. Naruto emptied the jar quickly, it was quite small in size, but he was feeling much better now that he had at least had something to eat. Licking off the last remnants, Naruto put the jar down. The rain outside was still going strong and he decided that he would spend the night here. But that Naruto milled around, it was really dark in the hallway as there were no windows and Naruto couldn't even light a candle as someone might come to check. Thankfully he had always been able to see slightly better than others in the dark and made it to the storage under the stairs. He hoped that he at least find a pillow or a dusty blanket, it was quite chilly and sleeping on his hand left it really numb in the morning. But those thoughts, Naruto touched the handle and turned it. Suddenly the flooring under his feet disappeared and his body was in free fall. Underground. Root HQ. Danzo Shimura had been having a normal day, as far as he was concerned, that is. He had a meeting with the Hokage with respect to the new genin team selections. His suggestions to alter the current teams were considered and then summarily dumped, that was no surprise. After the meeting he had received information from some of his contacts at the fire capital that the Yumehashi clan had been trying to revive the hidden tree village in the northern area of Fire Country and had dispatched a team of 4 members of Root to locate and assassinate the current clan head. His brother would be framed for the murder, and without someone to head the organization the movement would fizzle out. As it stood now, Danzo had been inspecting a network of tunnels under the compound of the Kuroki clan, a trading clan which had originally resided near the area where the village had been founded. The Shodaime had offered them a large tract of land inside the walls, and they had built their compound in the village. These tunnels had been dug by them towards the end of the First Great Shinobi War to store provisions of their trade in times of crisis. The trade which Danzo controlled now. As it stood, a majority of those of the Kuroki bloodline had left the village over the years, preferring to settle either at the massive port city of Genkai to the south or the fire capital, wherein traders were appreciated more. The only remaining member with a claim to these lands was an old woman who often alternated between living in Konoha and Genkai and would soon permanently shift to Genkai, leaving this land in the care of Akemi Fushiki, also known as Agent Number 25 of the 4th Platoon of Root. The compound by itself was vast, covered with thick vegetation and near the outskirts of the village, away from the more noble shinobi residential areas and clan compounds, and therefore poorly patrolled, making it the perfect place for running his operations. Danzo had been in the midst of planning his operation when one of his agents had approached him and signaled that something urgent had cropped up. Apparently someone had used one of the secret entrances to the underground without any prior authorization, and therefore it was concluded that it was the work of an intruder. The nearest team had swarmed the entrance, and the intruder had been caught. It was unsurprising, but what really caught Danzo's attention was the identity of the intruder. It was the Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox, Uzumaki Naruto himself, who had accidentally accessed the north entrance to the underground. Apparently the Jinchuriki was unable to use his chakra to stick to walls and had taken a free fall of over 130 feet, which broke his right leg, cracked the bones in his right arm, and also broke quite a few ribs. He had been rendered unconscious by the operatives and was currently bandaged and tied to a bed with an IV drip. "Report," Danzo spoke, gesturing to his medic. "Patient's name is Uzumaki Naruto," the medic answered robotically. "Right leg is damaged to a great extent, bones broken at multiple locations, right shoulder dislocated from impact, and multiple hairline fractures over the entire body frame. 4 of his ribs have broken, and 1 had managed to pierce his right lung. The bleeding has been stopped and patient is recovering at an exceptional rate. We are currently in the process of injecting glucose into his bloodstream as the calorie demand for regeneration has caused his blood sugar levels to collapse. Should regain consciousness in about 6 to 8 hours. Danzo nodded to her before turning his attention back to the Jinchuriki. The situation with his new base had suddenly become far more complicated. Generally, any such intruder would be incapacitated, interrogated and killed before his body was destroyed. Unfortunately, Uzumaki Naruto was a far too important figure in the village to just disappear overnight. Such an incident would lead to complete chaos, and the last thing Danzo needed was more people sniffing near his business. That was without accounting for the fact that losing the Jinchuriki would make the village far weaker. The second choice was that they would patch up the Jinchuriki and put him under a Jinjutsu to have him believe all he had seen was a dream. His subordinates would seal off the entry point used by Uzumaki, who would wake up from where he had disappeared without any recollection of the base. The option was viable and could be implemented immediately, but Danzo's mind was conjuring up a third possibility, one by which he could obtain what he had been desiring since many years. Danzo had petitioned since the sealing that the Jinchuriki boy be raised separately and in complete secrecy. With proper instruction and training, the aid of the demon inside him, and the blood of the strongest shinobi in the continent flowing through his veins, the boy could very well have been the village's greatest strength in any battle. The last Hiruzen had refused to see the logic in his words and had revealed the identity of the Jinchuriki to the masses, a mistake he attempted to rectify by enacting a secrecy law. A seemingly pointless gesture, as almost every functional adult who had been residing in the village 12 years ago knew about it. Danzo had extensively argued that there was a reason as to why Mito-sama's and Kishina Uzumaki's status as containers were classified secrets, but then again, Hiruzen had been an idealistic fool and had gone ahead with the illogical implementation of the wish of a dead man. Danzo had stopped petitioning for the boy to be trained for a few years. He had looked from afar how the potential for the strongest weapon had been replaced by a blundering idiot that desecrated village property for his amusement. He had instead tried to focus on getting his old body into shape. Orochimaru's research on the Shodaime cells had managed to create a prosthetic arm for him, but it wasn't stable yet, and his reaction time and strength was a far cry from what it had been in his prime. He had since tried to delve into utilizing the Sharingan's forbidden abilities, something he had been pondering since a few weeks, but not yet implemented. His interest in the Jinchuriki had peaked a week ago when he had received reports about the incident with Mizuki, an indication that Orochimaru was no longer honoring his end of the bargain by staying away from village affairs. Apparently the boy had managed to defeat a trained Chunin by himself and could utilize shadow clones in a manner never heard of before. But Danzo had chucked the report after reading it. Hada Kakashi was far too close to the Hokage to try and approach the Jinchuriki without raising any suspicion. But suddenly the Jinchuriki had landed right into his base. Haddock was doing a pretty lousy job at being a teacher to his own sensei's son if he had let the boy wander around in nearly abandoned clan districts, and Danzo was not going to let this chance pass at any cost. From what he knew, the Jinchuriki was starved for acknowledgement from the village populace and therefore adopted a cheery persona and loud personality which managed to at least produce annoyance from those he was around. While Danzo was sure that the promise of a flashy technique would be more than enough to buy a fleeting loyalty from the boy, it had become clear after the Mizuki incident that the boy knew very little about himself and would likely be willing to go to any extent for that information. Information that Danzo possessed. The only question was how much had already been revealed to the boy recently. The conversations the boy had with Hiruzen after the incident with Mizuki were shrouded in a veil of secrecy, and Danzo had no idea of just how much information had been revealed to the boy. Did he know of his lineage? Of his mother's clan? Of how his status as a Jinchuriki had been passed down the line of the Uzumaki clan? The only way to know about it was a fishing inquiry which could be executed by asking questions to the boy. It had been nearly impossible before, but now Danzo had him exactly where he wanted. Inform me immediately once he wakes up. Danzo then made his decision. If no one had started looking for the boy till now, then he was good until the next meeting with his team. Which meant that Danzo would have at least 2 hours of time to probe the boy, even assuming that the boy took 8 hours to wake up. Danzo would use this time to plan as to how he could utilize the information he possessed to obtain the boy's loyalty. "I'll F you to the base," Danzo commanded. Just in case the boy became unstable and lashed out, Danzo would have his memories of the base erased and dump him in the hospital. Nobody would be any wiser even in that scenario. Sometime later. With Naruto. Naruto awoke as he saw himself to be surrounded by water. He slowly got up to see that there were various pipes running around the area and there seemed to be ankle-deep water everywhere. It was dark, but it didn't really feel cold. Great, Naruto thought, did I fall into a sewer or something? Naruto looked up, but there was no hole in sight, meaning he was no longer under his earlier secret base and had most likely floated somewhere with the water. At least I didn't drown, Naruto thought as he walked. It was pretty dark here, but he could still see a bit ahead of him. Come here. A voice called out to him. There was someone down here. Great. Maybe they could tell him how to get out of this. Hey. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage Tobeo. Naruto spoke up and ran over to where the voice had come from. Having someone in here with him was a major booster for his mood. Here, the voice called out again, come just a little further. Naruto ran until he came across what appeared to be iron bars running into the darkness of the ceiling. Reluctantly he passed through them as the voice beckoned him. Shudder. It took all his might and quite a bit of luck for Naruto to dodge the swing of a massive claw, which would have surely killed him. The force of his jump carried him beyond the bars again, as two massive eyes opened in the darkness beyond the bars. So my jailer finally comes in for a visit. A massive jaw opened up to reveal jagged shark teeth. The darkness slowly faded to reveal a giant fox, 9 tails swishing behind it. Though you are just a runt, a shame I wasn't able to kill you. Why you? Naruto shouted, you're the 9-tailed fox. You seem to at least have a brain. The fox grinned. Now how about you come back in here and we finish what we had just started. Naruto stumbled back a bit. There were few times he had felt this kind of fear. Once it had been years ago when a drunkard had attacked him with a broken bottle, and a week ago when Mizuki threw that massive shuriken at him. Slowly his breath stabilized and his fear was replaced by anger. This goddamned fox was the reason for all his troubles. Without it he would still have parents, and no one would ignore or hate him like they did right now. Where the hell am I? Naruto half wondered, half asked as he looked around for a clue. Mizuki said that the fox was sealed inside his stomach, so why the hell were they in a sewer of all places? This is your mindscape, the Kyuubi spoke. How fitting for it to manifest as a sewer. Speaks volumes about a pathetic being such as yourself. The hell are you talking about? Naruto shouted. They were in his mind. And it was a sewer, yuck. The little stunt you pulled nearly got us killed, the Kyuubi spoke. The only reason you are even surviving right now is my chakra. Without it you would already be dead. Be grateful for this gift of life. Red chakra floated across the water from inside the cage. It swirled around Naruto before it completely surrounded him. Now go, the Kyuubi spoke. I have no need to talk to runts such as you. The red chakra suddenly seemed to cave in on itself and smothered Naruto, who screamed in panic. Brute base. AI Naruto got up with a start to find that he was no longer in a sewer. Instead it was a white ceiling, and only one place he knew had white ceilings. Looking around, Naruto could say that he was in a hospital. He tried to move his arms, but both his arms and his feet were bound. He could only see with his left eye as his right eye seemed to have been bandaged, and so were his arms and a major chunk of his body. Did I fall into an old pit or something? Naruto distinctly remembered that Iruka-sensei had said something about how many clans dug pits underneath their houses to store supplies in time of need, and often to hide themselves as well. Finally calming down, Naruto recalled what had happened. He had just turned the handle to the storage, and then he suddenly fell down a dark tunnel and landed hard on his leg. The last memory he had was of a masked guy like the Anbu rushing to him before he passed out. Great, one day of being a ninja and I'm in the hospital. Naruto grumbled mentally as he saw a long-haired guy move into the room. You're awake, okay, judging from the voice this was a lady and not a guy as he thought. Naruto tried to nod, but his neck hurt. Do not move, the lady spoke, you have multiple broken bones and hairline fractures, moving will only cause pain until they are healed. Naruto simply blinked. The woman then moved near the door and pressed a button. Uzumaki-san has regained consciousness, she spoke, informed Danzo-sama immediately. Danzo-sama? Was he the new doctor? A few moments later a weathered old man slid into the room, half of his face was covered in bandages, and he was walking by using a cane. The lady bowed to the man before he came near Naruto and sat on a chair. Uzumaki-san, Danzo spoke, my name is Shimura Danzo. Naruto felt himself get a bit scared, this man had really impassive eyes. It is a pleasure to meet you, though I believe you do not know me. Naruto tried to talk, but these guys had bandaged his mouth as well. Impassively Danzo made a gesture, and the lady moved near him and slit the bandages in a way that let him talk. No sir, contrary to what everyone thought, Naruto wasn't really rude, it was just that acting politely had caused people to just outright ignore him. At least when he was loud, people acknowledged that he existed, if only by conveying annoyance. But right now Naruto knew he had to be polite, something about this crippled old man had alarm bells ringing in his mind. Danzo himself had been surprised, he had half expected the boy to shout about being let out of the hospital, but he seemed more subdued now. Maybe the clownish idiot was just a created persona. Danzo looked on at the blonde, intrigued by his recovery. He moved some of the slit bandages to see that a major portion of the face had been healed without leaving any scars. The IV drip had seemingly provided the boy's body with enough calories to boost his already inhuman healing abilities. Truly marvelous, Danzo spoke, weighing his words cautiously, you heal even faster than your mother used to. What? You heal even faster than your mother. What? Naruto shot up like a bolt, pain in the neck be damned. This guy knew his mother. However, his reaction proved to be quite bad for himself as his chest started to pain as well. He started coughing violently and was forced to lie down again as the masked lady pinned him down by the shoulders. Why, you knew my mom? Naruto asked, subdued after the initial reaction. Yes I did, Danzo internally smirked at the revelation. It seems that his concerns regarding Hiruzen placing the boy under Haddock's tutelage were exaggerated, the boy still had zero knowledge of his status or lineage. It would have been appalling had it not turned the situation so completely in Danzo's favor, scratch that it was still appalling. Intelligence reports indicated that the Hidden Cloud village had a Jinchuriki who could completely control the powers of the eight-tailed ox, and that the Jinchuriki of the two-tailed cat was on a similar path. The Hidden Rock village had Hand of the Steam Armor, someone Danzo had personally fought and knew was a threat, even though he lacked complete control over his beast. Rashi, while being on an even lower level than Hand, had proven his ability to utilize the lava release from housing his tailed beast and was a formidable fighter. The Mizukage was himself the host of the three-tailed turtle and had another Jinchuriki as backup in the form of Utakata. Sunagaker had apparently failed to forge their weapon correctly, but the result had still been more desirable than what the Leaf village currently possessed. This was not mentioning the reports of the Seven Tails Jinchuriki having manifested special abilities similar to those of the Aburam clan in the Hidden Waterfall village, a minor power that had recently started to flex its muscle. Throughout the elemental nations the Jinchuriki had been mobilized, they were ready and extremely dangerous. Therefore, Danzo would ensure that Konohagakure would not lose out in the weapons race, the boy would learn to control the powers of the fox and use it in battle. Kushina had proven that it was indeed possible without the Sharingan. Even if the boy was not able to do so like his mother, the nearly endless well of chakra he was provided with by the Bijuu, combined with his accelerated regeneration, would allow him to push past the physical limits which constrained any normal shinobi. The simple speed training course alone could create a monster as fast as the Yondaime in a much shorter span of time. Either way he would be the perfect weapon. Danzo would ensure that the boy would obey, after all it seemed as though he would willingly trade an organ just to know who his mother was. Naruto for his part was hyperventilating, he had spent years running around the village asking anyone he could find about the identity of his parents. People mostly ignored him, and his caretakers at the orphanage just shouted at him to not annoy them. One particularly mean lady had told him that they had left him because he was a very bad boy. Naruto had then vowed to be a good boy, he always listened to what his elders told him, stayed quiet, drank his milk and never complained. He did it for years as a kid, but still his parents never came back. So in the end he asked the kind old man with the pointy hat, who sometimes came to visit him when he was alone, maybe he knew about his mommy and daddy. The old guy would be able to tell them that he was a good boy now, so they could take him home. The fact that they were both dead had hit him like a ton of bricks, he had cried for days before he could bring himself to accept the fact that he would never meet his parents. Then one day some of the kids at the orphanage had started getting some stuff from a box which the caretaker had come back with. The caretaker told them that the stuff in the box used to belong to the parents of the kids before they died. Takahashi had gotten a really cool wooden sword, and Kasaki had gotten a set of really pretty fans which belonged to her mother. Naruto had run to the box as well, maybe his dad left him something really cool. Maybe his mom had made a scarf. He grasped for anything. Something to prove who he was, something which he could call his own. But the caretaker had just shooed him away, saying that his parents had left him nothing. Naruto had at least hoped for a sewing needle, his shirt had been torn, and no one would give him one to repair it. Maybe they were too poor. That had been the first time Naruto had ever heard a possibility of what his parents might have been like, even though he was sure Takahashi had meant it as an insult, but Naruto had still conjured an image. At least it gave him a sense of belonging. Naruto envisioned his parents living in a rusty shed, like he had seen once he had snuck out of the orphanage at night. A man had been living under a temporary shed in the forest. He didn't really seem to have much on him, dirty rags for clothes, one eye covered by an equally dirty bandana, while he was boiling something blackish in an old metal can over a pile of wood. It was easy for Naruto to think that his father could have been the same, his mother clad in something equally dirty sitting next to him with a baby version of himself in her arms, just before the Kyuubi struck. The image was with him for months, and would have possibly stayed with him till date if the old man Hokage hadn't mentioned once during lunch that his parents were shinobi. Naruto had never been happier in his life. But then the old man had just gone back saying that he didn't know who they were, but Naruto was just glad too now that his parents were ninja. The Bocchi had once mentioned that his mother had probably been a whore, whatever that meant. Maybe a whore was some kind of ninja. But still he had no name, and now suddenly there was this old man in front of him who was casually saying that he healed faster than his mother. How? Naruto croaked. I asked Hokage Jiji, he said even he didn't know. I do not know what you have been or haven't been told, Danzo spoke, but I know of your mother because I taught her how to be a shinobi. She used to be my student earlier. This guy was his mother's teacher, so was he like Kakashi-sensei to his mom? That meant she was a ninja, so why didn't the Hokage know? And as for the Hokage, I believe that he does not trust you enough for you to be aware of this information. Danzo spoke. Naruto's head whipped to the side, the excruciating pain in his neck temporarily forgotten as he glared at Danzo. This guy was wrong. Completely and utterly wrong. Jiji was awesome to Bayo. He came to visit Naruto at his apartment and even treated him to ramen. Most importantly, Jiji never looked at him with those cold eyes. Naruto was about to open his mouth and deliver a scathing rebuke to this old cripple when the man put his hand into his robe and put something on the table. Looking closely, Naruto saw a photo of a lady. She had long red hair held up in a ponytail and was smiling at the camera. She had vibrant green eyes that seemed so full of life and was wearing a dark blue kimono with pretty cherry blossom petals on it. Beautiful was all Naruto could think before his attention was drawn back to the old guy. Her name, Danzo spoke, was Uzumaki Kushina, and she was the previous host of the Nine-Tailed Fox before your birth. Naruto's poor brain couldn't take it any longer, and he passed out. Danzo did his best to not let a smirk creep onto his features. He had spent a better part of the last 5 hours rehearsing what he would say to the Jinchuriki, and it seemed that his approach was working. All readings are normal, Danzo-sama, the medic spoke, he should awaken in a few minutes. Danzo remembered the time he had been called upon by Mito-sama herself to address the issue of Uzumaki Kushina's training. It had been a time after the Second Great Shinobi War, Konoha itself had been low on strength, and the nearly successful kidnapping of the maiden of the Uzumaki clan by the shinobi of Hidden Cloud had pushed everyone on the edge. She had not been a part of the route, far from it. Mito-sama, to whom he had owed a debt of life, had personally asked him to take up her training as his own student, and Danzo had done as he was asked. For over 3 years Danzo had trained her to near perfection, while she had not been very good at ninjutsu and was unable to use many of his prized wind techniques. She had picked up kinjutsu like a duck to water and had grown to become a very skilled kunoichi, capable of holding out on her own against some of the most capable ninja on the continent. What she was unable to achieve in terms of ninjutsu and jinjutsu had been covered by her unique capability to form chakra chains and her hereditary skills in fuinjutsu. She had been his only student, the rest of his force only ever being trainees. Her strength had been formidable even before she started to call upon the beast sealed inside her, a power she was able to control to a far greater degree than her predecessor. Despite her skills, in the end Danzo had been disappointed in her for being far too soft for his liking. During combat she would spare enemy ninja when killing would be more efficient and had grown far too attached to the philosophy of peace as had been propounded by Hiruzen down his line of teaching. Danzo knew that the yandere Hokage, who happened to be her lover, had a greater role in convincing her about the philosophy and had moved to create a distance between her and Danzo over the last few years before his death. It was a distance Danzo had accepted. He was a shinobi of darkness after all. He had been called upon to complete a mission to teach Kushina Uzumaki and had executed it flawlessly. However, in spite of the fact that he told this to Kushina, she had always referred to him as sensei whenever their paths would cross and had more than a few times admonished both her lover and her lover's perverted teacher for not respecting him, sometimes physically as well. Even when he had been distant, she had always tried to keep in touch by writing him letters about her missions and often sending pictures such as the one he had pulled out in front of the boy. Her marriage had been a surprise and her pregnancy even more so, considering the perils it would bring upon the village if anything went wrong at the time of birth. There was a very good chance of the seal weakening to an extent that the Nine Tails could break free. He had attempted to talk to Hiruzen into trying to beat some sense into the young couple. Surely there were many other medical options available to couple if they desired to have a child. Danzo had even volunteered to provide a trained surrogate if required. As usual, his concerns had been brushed aside and he was told that everything was under control. Out of options, Danzo had finally written to Kushina himself. Surprisingly, she had responded and asked to meet with him. He still remembered the meeting. "I understand that you are worried, sensei, both for the village and for me, even if you don't admit the latter. But for Minato and me, this is something we have both wanted for a long time, our own family. I promise that we will lay down our life to protect the village if anything happens. But just this once we want to be selfish." Danzo had been unable to speak anything to her thereafter. It was true that she and her husband, an idiot as the guy had been, had contributed more to the village than entire clans had in many generations. So as long as they could take all required precautions, he had stayed away. How everything had gone so horribly wrong that night was still a question that plagued him to this day. To his knowledge, a temporary hospital had been set up by Bawako Sarutobi herself for the birth. The yandere had been personally present to keep the seal intact and the place was guarded by 2 squadrons of Anbu. Still, despite everything, the Kyuubi had managed to escape from the seal and had attacked the village. Both the yandere and Kushina had died that night, their corpses nearly hollow from having been impaled by the gigantic claw of the fox in an attempt to preserve the last of both their bloodlines. Something in Danzo had snapped that night. He did not know whether it had been the sheer destruction wrought by the beast on the village he had sworn to protect, the magnitude of shinobi lives that had been snuffed out in moments, or the loss of probably the only student he had ever trained, but something dark had swirled inside his chest. The feeling had persisted, hours had turned to days, weeks and thereafter years, as Danzo blamed the soft approach of Hiruzen for the tragedy that had befallen the village. If only he had been stricter with the couple regarding alternate forms of conceiving, then everything could have been avoided. If the shinobi had been better trained, then it could have been avoided. Konoha had needed to be stronger, it needed to be more efficient. The weaker shinobi in the forces needed to shape up or stripped of their rank. A shinobi could not afford to be emotional in the decisions he took. Emotions clouded judgment, they forced capable men to bow to fleeting whims and fancies, and ultimately ended up with death and the destruction of all those involved. The rejection of his proposals once again was what gave birth to the current form of Root, as it was. Danzo had been involved in this division of the Anbu after the first Great Shinobi War. They bore no official positions, and their records in the village had since long been either wiped out or manipulated to help them remain undercover. Root specialized in executing missions the village itself could not take openly. The basic operating procedure had been something that the Nidaime Hokage had himself written during his lifetime to create an invisible force that would protect the village from the shadows. Over the years, Root had been active, performing political assassinations in and out of Fire Country, making deals with the underworld for information relating to security of the village, sabotaging enemy operations, planting sleeper cells, creating deep assets and when necessary, providing covert support to dissenting groups in enemy territory. The operatives themselves were people who prima facie remained detached to the world of shinobi and would only don their shinobi garb when on a mission. The structure had been altered under Danzo, but it changed drastically after the attack by the Nine Tails. Soon enough, Danzo had stopped recruiting from Anbu or the regular forces and had instead started recruiting children who were conditioned to discard emotions and trained to the limits of their abilities. Much of the old guard had been compulsorily retired and those still in their teenage years were conditioned in a similar way as to the children. Some of the clans had been coerced to contribute to the forces as well, bolstering their numbers and overall strength. Hiruzen had been rather vocal about what he had described as Danzo's descent into darkness, but the nearly flawless mission completion record of the new Root had forced him to remain silent. Still he had, over the period of the last few years, argued for scaling down of root operations at a time when the villages were at a relative peace. This absurdist idea had led to Danzo simply following the textbook art of deception. While root operations were scaled down on the front and Danzo activated the underground cell, whereby a major chunk of root operations were now conducted directly under Danzo and completely outside of the purview or knowledge of the Hokage. Danzo had even utilized some of Orochimaru's connections for information in the past, but Mizuki's attempted defection meant that he had to be more wary of the snake. The snake who seemed to be more than willing to dishonor agreements, perhaps he could report the last known location of the snake to the hidden mist. They had certainly wanted to extract their pound of flesh from the snake. That was if those idiots could find some free time after slaughtering their own clans for something as ridiculous as possessing a bloodline. Naruto groggily opened his eyes. He had just had the weirdest dream wherein an old guy wearing bandages had told him that a pretty red-haired lady was his mother. Really weird. As he tried to move, a searing pain shot through his body. His brain suddenly went into overdrive as he observed his surroundings. He was in a hospital. Check. The old guy was here. Check. The photo of the pretty red-haired lady was in front of him. Check. Conclusion. This was definitely not a dream. It seems you have woken up, Danzo spoke. I believe you would like to see this for yourself. Danzo made a gesture as the medic moved and loosened some of the restrictions on Naruto's arms and raised the back of the bed to get him into a semi-sitting position. Wordlessly, Danzo picked up the photo frame and handed it to the boy. Naruto took the frame as carefully as he could, delicately cradling the frame in one arm. Naruto ran his fingers over picture. He felt a warmth come over his body as he continued to look at the picture. So this woman was his mother. Wait a sec. How do I know you're not lying? Naruto asked, his grip over the frame hardened. Over the years Naruto had many people lying to him about many things. There was a time he was invited into a hotel with a promise of a warm meal, but he had been kicked out the moment food had been served before him, before he could even take a bite. The patrons laughing at his face as he looked on in confusion. Whether or not you choose to believe me is upon you, Danzo spoke, having anticipated the question. However, there are two factors I believe I should tell you which will aid your process of arriving at a conclusion. Naruto just looked at the guy, and he continued. Firstly, Danzo spoke, I have nothing to gain from lying to you about this, and secondly, Danzo paused for a moment, if the Hokage were to even catch a whiff of me revealing this information to you, he would have me executed. Naruto just sat stunned, was this guy really saying the truth? But again Naruto thought, Mizuki team said that there was a law about me and the fox, so maybe this was something similar. No longer as excited as he had been a few moments ago, Naruto let his shoulders relax. Well, Mizuki had revealed this information about the fox and had just tried to kill him. This guy felt a bit different. There was something inside Naruto which told him that this guy was telling the truth and Naruto wanted to know more. But that just begged the question as to why this guy would reveal this information to him if it could get him killed. Did he want to kill him and leave the village like Mizuki team did? No, Naruto thought, if he just wanted to take it out on me, he wouldn't have me patched up like this. Plus the guy didn't have the same cold eyes as the villagers. Well, they weren't warm like Iruka-sensei or the Hokage, but Naruto knew that this guy certainly didn't hate him. Which could only mean that this guy wanted something from him and was willing to trade information for whatever he wanted despite risking death. I take it that you wish to know what I gain from revealing something like this to you, despite the risk of death. Naruto nodded, this guy was good. Definitely a ninja. For one, Danzo spoke, you are the Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox and occupy a key position in the village. That is in not just keeping the fox at bay, but also as a deterrent from potential to other villages who might be willing to attack us. Jinchuriki? Was all Naruto could ask. Literally, Danzo spoke, it means the power of human sacrifice. Figuratively, it is a term used for persons who have been used to seal a tailed beast. The nine-tailed fox would be a most fitting example. So, Naruto could feel himself sweat, there are others like me. Indeed, Danzo spoke, even your mother was one, however it would be more convenient to tell you everything in a more structured manner. I take it you are willing to be an obedient listener. Yes, Naruto spoke, he wanted to know everything about himself and his family. After what seemed like a whole day of talking, the old guy was done, and Naruto was, for a lack of vocabulary, blown out of his mind. In this world, there had resided Biju the tailed beasts. They were beings composed almost completely of chakra and were known to wield massive power. No one really knew where they came from, and theories ranged from scientific experiments of an old civilization to them being created by the sage of the six paths, the mythical progenitor of all chakra. The nine-tailed fox was said to be the strongest of them all, but it remained elusive for centuries. Over the years, many people had tried to tame these beasts but had failed. This was until a clan in Wind Country had managed to weaken the one-tailed raccoon and seal it inside one of their clansmen, creating the world's first known Jinchuriki. This had led to chaos in the world, and therefore two of the strongest clans at the time, the Uchiha and the Senju, had entered into an alliance and set up this village as a deterrent to attacks from foreign powers. The arrangement had worked until one day the head of the Uchiha clan had left the village in rage and had come back later with the bane of Naruto's existence. The nine-tailed fox. Apparently able to control the fox with some new Sharingan as the guy had described, the man known as Madara Uchiha had attacked the village and the Shodaime Hokage had fought him with his wife Mito Senju, her maternal name being Mito Uzumaki. The Uzumaki themselves were a clan closely related to the Senju and had their ancestral home on an island near water country. They were known for three things: their sensory abilities, their strong vitality and their skills in the art of Fuinjutsu, the ability to create and utilize seals. Mito Uzumaki had used her Fuinjutsu skills to seal the nine-tailed fox inside her body once it had been temporarily suppressed by the Shodaime Hokage, using his special ability the wood release, a cool technique only he alone could use. Mito-sama had thereafter borne the burden till her death, which was then transferred onto his mother Kushina Uzumaki. His mother had been born in the traditional stronghold of the Uzumaki, in Whirlpool Country. She had been specifically sent to the Hidden Leaf to bear the burden because the Uzumaki bloodline ran strong in her and she had a special chakra which was suited for the task. Apparently the chakra of the fox was very bad and it had been concluded that only someone with a very strong life force could take the burden, therefore his mother becoming the Jinchuriki had been a foregone conclusion. The old man told him that she did not desire to do it, but she had little choice in the matter. It was then that the Hidden Eddy village, the home of the Uzumaki, was destroyed by an attack coordinated by the Hidden Cloud, the Hidden Rock and the Hidden Mist village. They had learned about the advantage of having an Uzumaki as a Jinchuriki and had demanded that those strong in the blood must be handed over to create strong weapons. The Uzumaki had naturally refused and the villages had attacked. The Hidden Leaf, involved already in an ongoing war with the Hidden Sand village, had been unable to provide any reinforcements in time and the village had been destroyed, a major portion of the island had simply been sunk. What little remained of the Uzumaki had been scattered across the continent, most of the people that had been requeued were civilians, but they had moved away from the hidden villages, trying to put the world of shinobi behind them. Kushina Uzumaki herself had been kidnapped once by the Hidden Cloud after the incident in an attempt to create a perfect Jinchuriki, but had been rescued by the village. She had then been trained by this old man for years before she became a jonin and served as a frontline fighter. The most surprising part of the discussion being that she had been able to use the fox, something Naruto failed to understand. It is natural after all, Danzo spoke, a Biju is far too powerful an entity to be completely sealed away. The seal on a Jinchuriki itself is heavily dependent on drawing chakra from the host to keep the beast at bay, so when your own chakra depletes beyond a certain level, the beast tries to push its own chakra to replace it in order to loosen the seal. Mito-sama herself had never been a frontline fighter, firstly due to her status and secondly, due to the sheer strain the seal put on her body. The strain caused her to age prematurely and would often leave her drained, even if she never did anything remotely tiring. On the contrary, Danzo paused before continuing, your mother's seal was a true work of art. In order to set off the drain the seal put on her body, a different approach was adopted, which allowed some of the fox's chakra to slowly seep into her system gradually to bolster her own reserves. As a side effect she was able to even draw on its power to some extent without loosening the seal too much and combined with her skills, it made her a very formidable frontline fighter. I dare say your seal should be similar. Naruto gulped at the revelation, he would be able to use the fox. But then, what happened? Naruto asked, his mom sounded like a really cool and strong lady. So how did she die? How come the Kyuubi attacked the village if it was sealed inside her? Did it get free somehow? Unfortunately, Danzo spoke, the exact details of what happened at the time of your birth, but there are a few things we know. Naruto stayed silent, smirking internally at having completely gained his trust. Danzo continued, pregnancy is especially straining on a Jinchuriki, therefore. Pregnancy? Naruto asked. Pregnancy, Danzo spoke, not letting his irritation reflect in his voice, I take it you do not know what it means. No, Naruto spoke. It is when a woman is carrying her child inside her body, Danzo spoke, he was irritated at having to explain something this sublime to the boy, but continued as it was necessary for his manipulation, surely you have seen a few women around the village with bigger stomachs, they look like that because they are carrying their future children inside their body before they are strong enough to be born in this world. So they weren't just fat. Naruto thought, internally he pictured his mom having a big tummy with him inside. The image made him feel warm. And as I was saying, Danzo continued, it is a very strenuous period for a woman, and with your mother being a Jinchuriki herself it was even more difficult. The child inside the body is very demanding, and in case of shinobi a major part of the chakra inside the woman is directed to nourishing the child, as a result the seal holding the beast can weaken, and it can make an attempt to escape. Naruto felt like a stone dropped in his stomach. Was it because of him that the fox got free? Did his mother die because she was carrying him? Therefore Kushina Uzumaki's pregnancy was kept a classified secret. Danzo edged on. Bawako Saratobi, the late wife of the Sandaime Hokage herself, was tasked with ensuring a safe birth, and the foremost sealing experts of the village were deputed to ensure that the Biju would not escape and you would be born safely. Then why Naruto could feel his throat go dry. If everything was already arranged, then what happened? How did his mom die? The details are still unclear. Danzo spoke. The site of the temporary hospital was razed to the ground during the attack. However, my suspicion is that someone had attacked Kushina and set the beast free, as there is no other conceivable manner in which something could have gone wrong otherwise. The seal on your mother was far too advanced to have been simply broken by the fox despite her weakened status, but nobody except the Hokage knows. Multiple attempts to obtain that information from my side have been rebuffed. This wasn't a complete lie. Even though Danzo didn't have official access to the files, it never meant he didn't know what was in them. But in order to turn the boy, he would have to play like this. For the first time since the conversation had started, Naruto felt angry towards the Hokage. Not only was he never told who his mother was, but to keep the knowledge of death a secret as well. Did the Hokage trust him at all? Were those Anbu always trailing him for his safety, or did they just keep an eye on him? Naruto suddenly wasn't so sure anymore. For his entire life, Naruto had been alone. No caretaker would talk to him in the orphanage, except when absolutely necessary. He was not allowed to talk to the other children of the orphanage and wasn't even allowed in the general playing area. Sometimes this led to Naruto sneaking out from the place at night, but the reactions of the people on the street weren't really favorable either. At all those times, it was Hokage Jiji who had come to visit Naruto. He had been the only one to greet the boy with a smile, to acknowledge him and not look at him with those cold eyes he was generally used to. It was Hokage Jiji who got him the apartment he was living in and entered him into the academy so that he could be a ninja. It was the persona of the man itself that gave Naruto the dream to become the Hokage. If he could be like that, then everyone would respect him. Now, suddenly he felt himself doubt everything that had happened with him. He had come to an understanding that not being told about the fox had been for his own benefit, but the episode in his mind had somewhat warped that as well. What if he didn't know about the fox? What if Mizuki team had never run off his mouth and told him? Would he have lived then? How easy it could have been for the fox to trick him when he didn't know what he was. As a great topping to this really bitter bowl of ramen, he had come to know that he had a family, one that the Hokage knew about but kept from him. No, the Hokage didn't just hide the truth. That was something Naruto could have forgiven. The Hokage had lied, even after the incident with Mizuki team when Naruto had asked him again about everything that had happened in his life and about the fox, but he had been told nothing. The same old routine had passed once again. There was no news about parents or who he was. The only thing he had learned that the Yondaime had wished for Naruto to be seen as a hero by the village. Why did he not tell him that he had a family? That his mother loved him enough to brave the fox for him? That his mother had once borne the same burden that he did? That he was not the first to bear the burden like this? Knowing all this, Naruto felt himself re-evaluating everything in his life. Suddenly he felt very numb. What? Naruto croaked. About my dad. I know of his identity as well. Danzo spoke, much pleased as to how vulnerable the boy was now. There was no trace of his earlier boisterous and rebellious personality and an unsureness of everything he had assumed he knew. But you must understand, I have already put myself in a very uncomfortable position by revealing what I have. If anyone were to know, then I'll never tell on you to Bayo. Naruto spoke, suddenly as if broken out of a trance. I swear that I'll never tell anyone what you told me. That's a promise. Good. Danzo spoke. He had obtained the boy's loyalty to a great degree now. All that was left was to press a few more buttons. But any further information you desire will only be revealed once you make another promise, Naruto-san. What is it? Naruto asked eagerly. He had already known that this guy would want something from him in return. But right now Naruto would give him his hand if he wanted. Firstly, Danzo spoke, you are to swear by the fact that you shall protect the village with your life if so required. You will place the village above all else. Do you agree? Absolutely. Naruto spoke, just that. He was going to do it anyway. Secondly, Danzo spoke, you will have to accept my terms of service, a deal if you must. Naruto gave the guy a pointed look. He had known that the guy wouldn't reveal life-threatening information to him without asking for something in return. But could he want? It didn't look like he wanted money, because he had to know that the blonde didn't have any. So what could he want? Naruto was having a headache thinking too much and therefore just went ahead as he always did. Tell me, what kind of deal is it, Jiji Tabeyo? I swear I'll do anything to know more. After all, what could this old guy do that hadn't been done to him already? I swear I'll do anything to know more. Danzo forced down a smirk as he heard those words. Hiruzen is a fool. Now he will know what I was talking about when I said that this boy could be the village's greatest strength. I see, Danzo spoke. However, I will describe the deal to you before you consider your final decision. It relates closely to the events tied to your birth. Naruto looked on, there was something more relating to his birth. Soon after your status was revealed, Danzo spoke, I had propositioned to the Hokage that you should have been raised separately, and your status kept a guarded secret similar to what was done with your mother and Mito-sama before. However, and therefore, what I propose is that you will report to me and serve as a guardian of the village. In return I offer the same training I provided to your mother, even more if you have the talent and tenacity to learn what she could not. Naruto sat still as he contemplated the Danzo's words. As the old man said, had asked that Naruto should have been raised in secret with ninja who would train him to harness and control his chakra and that of the fox. They would have made him super strong and badass like his mom. Then Naruto would be able to go on super cool missions and show everyone how awesome he was. But Hokage Jiji said no and wanted to honor the wishes of the fourth Hokage and revealed his status to the villagers. Later when the villagers started to hate Naruto, the Hokage made a law that anyone who spoke about it in the village would be killed, hoping that this would prevent the hate they felt from passing on to his generation. He had hoped that letting Naruto stay in the academy would let him make friends and become normal like everyone. Great way to go, Jiji, Naruto thought. He generally didn't get sarcasm or whatever it was called, but could feel why people liked to use that. Normal, all of his life, nothing had ever been normal. No one in the orphanage treated him like another child, he was always locked away and punished for being a bad boy. People in the streets glared at him as he walked around, and when he looked back they looked away and acted as if he didn't exist. Like he was always someone else's problem. At the shops the people would either refuse him service or just charge him so much that in the end he had to survive on cup ramen. In the academy kids made fun of him and took away his stuff when he was not there. He was beaten around the corridors by Hibachi and his idiot gang for years before they graduated. The instructors in his earlier years just plain off ignored him, no one would answer no help him, no matter how politely he asked. Any attempt at lashing out was punished badly and therefore he had finally turned to pranks. At least they actually talked to him like a normal boy when they were mad at him for something other than being the jail of the fox. Naruto had endured. He had vowed to show them how awesome he was by being the Hokage. All that when he could have grown up differently, without mean people and teachers who actually taught him. He could have known he had a family, a mom that loved him and was super strong. He could have already been an awesome ninja when he was stuck with Sasuke of all people. It was at that moment that Naruto decided that he didn't like Hokage Jiji that much anymore. He couldn't shake the warm feeling when the old man treated him to ramen in the earlier years, but lying to him was the limit to which Naruto's forgiveness extended. Danzo surveyed the boy, his lone Sharingan beneath his bandages, let him clearly read the body language of the boy even beneath his bandages. He had the boy exactly where he wanted, but he had to ensure that there was a long-term loyalty embedded inside his mind and not just something fleeting born of temporary rage. You, Danzo spoke, can take the remainder of next week to convey your response. Naruto looked up to the guy, his eyes blazing. He wanted to join now. Ryujan, an instructor, Hada Kakashi appears to have been chosen specifically for your team, Danzo spoke. While I do not agree with the Hokage on many issues, you and your upbringing included, it would not be becoming of me to interfere unless you are still being kept in the dark. So I shall wait and give you the opportunity to see for yourself. Naruto looked on at the guy, maybe Jiji wasn't that bad. Maybe Kakashi-sensei would teach him something awesome. Maybe he'd tell him who his dad was. Okay, Naruto spoke, his fingers tracing the frame, I suppose I can't keep this Jiji. I'm afraid not, Danzo spoke, he did not like to be addressed in such a manner, but it was a testament to the fact that he had gained the boy's trust to a great extent. Anyone who sees you with this will report it to the Hokage, and I understand, Naruto spoke, uncharacteristically sober, but later. Maybe when you can tell me. I shall, Danzo spoke, retrieving the frame, it is the least I can do for my only student son. How? Naruto took one last look at the frame before speaking, can I tell you? I don't remember how I even got here. No need to worry, Danzo spoke, on the next Sunday morning, head to this address. Danzo handed him a slip and asked for the finest cheese bread. I shall contact you then. Naruto nodded, this was a really weird way of doing this, but maybe it was how the Anbu worked. Lastly, Danzo spoke, though you have already promised, I need to remind you that you are to never speak of this meeting or what you have learned to anyone else. The information I have provided to you is beyond classified. Including the fact that it was me who gave it to you will cause far too many problems for either of us to handle. I promise I'll never tell anyone to Bayo. Naruto spoke, but what's with you giving the information? Aren't you like Jiji's friend or something? I think I've seen you near the tower. We used to be, Danzo spoke, but we have not seen eye to eye for many years. He believes me as far too steeped in old teachings for not conforming to his philosophy, including the fact that I provided this information to you, while he judged it fit not to be given would be perceived as an insult. One grievous enough to warrant death. An insult. How the heck was telling me about my mom an insult to anybody? Who the hell does Jiji think he is? I won't tell Jiji, Naruto spoke with finality. Good, Danzo spoke. Naruto's vision began to get a bit cloudy. Now sleep. Naruto woke up groggily on a training ground, the birds chirping around indicating that dawn had begun. Was that all a dream? Naruto felt a sharp stab of pain in his leg as memories of last night hit him. Memories of the old man and his mother. The bandages around his body just provided him with the proof it wasn't a dream. He had a mother and more importantly he had a name. She was a pretty and an awesome ninja, and that old man had trained her. He was gonna be just as awesome as his mom Tobeo. Arg. Alright, Naruto spoke, no jumping for now. Idly feeling around his pockets, Naruto found a wad of cash and a few ration bars. When did? A written note fell from cash. For your sustenance, use wisely. There are a few doses of medicine in your jacket to be taken after you eat something. Destroy the note when done. Naruto didn't know what sustenance meant, but Danzo Jiji was awesome Tobeo. Naruto ate the ration bar, it wasn't tasty like ramen, but he was really hungry. He then took a tablet from his jacket and downed it with some water from a nearby stream, before tearing the note and chucking the paper in the water. Now he had to go and meet Kakashi-sensei and his team. If Hokage Jiji had made Kakashi their teacher for a special reason, then Naruto bet that he was gonna get some kick-ass training for today. He'd show Sasuke then. And then Sakura-chan would see how awesome he was and agree to go on a date with him. Deep underground Fu Yamanaka bowed before his leader. He was currently awaiting orders on his assignment regarding Uzumaki Naruto. Shall I have Uzumaki tailed Danzo-sama? No need, Danzo spoke. From what I have seen he is most unlikely to reveal anything about the meeting. Have the on-ground assets keep an eye on him when he is not with his team, keep providing covert support to him for his necessities, and make sure that he knows of the source. Understood Danzo-sama. Fu disappeared in a swirl of leaves leaving Danzo to his thoughts. His meeting with the boy had been most fruitful, and had he been a little more manipulative, then the boy would have sworn his loyalty to him, just on account of the rage against those who withheld his birthright. But Danzo wanted his loyalty to be more concrete. Hada Kakashi, for his record, was one of the best shinobi the village had as of now. The sole surviving member of the Yondaime Hokage's Genin team was a genius. He had become a chunin by the age most children started with the academy and had become a jounin around the time he should have graduated. He had an illustrious record in the Anbu as an operative and had served as a captain for a few years before he had rejoined the pool of jounin and served as a more public face of the village. On record, he was probably the most suited man to lead Team 7. He was the sole surviving student of the Yondaime Hokage and therefore had a connection to Naruto Uzumaki, and being the only loyal Sharingan wielder in the village, he was perfect to train Sasuke Uchiha. The civilian-born girl in the team was apparently intelligent enough to be at the top of her classes and would serve as a support fighter, perhaps a medic or a genjutsu specialist. Perfect on paper. Danzo knew better than to believe it. Haddock had been slacking for years, letting his finely honed abilities degenerate to a level whereby he was just slightly better than an average jounin. His behavior as per mission reports indicated that he was suffering from clinical depression for an extended period of time and had one of the worst cases of the survivor's syndrome from the amount of time he spent near the graves of his teammates. Not a very ideal choice to lead a team of freshly minted genin. By giving Naruto the choice to choose between his and Hiruzen's path, the boy would believe he had a choice and ensure that Danzo had complete control thereafter. It of course helped that Danzo knew of all the variables in the equation quite well and knew what choice the boy would make. Haddock had succumbed to his depression since a long time, his behavior tilting him towards indolence. Given the current circumstances, Danzo knew what was going to happen next week. If Haddock had not checked up on Naruto Uzumaki on day 1, he would not be doing it anytime soon. Given his indolence, he was more likely to focus on the talented genin in his team, where he could quickly observe results of what he taught and feel better about it. Naruto Uzumaki would not be in that bracket and would most likely to be told to revise his basics with little assistance from the man until he was deemed to be at par with his teammates. Sasuke Uchiha meanwhile would no doubt receive some extra training, given the fact that he had to worry about Itachi Uchiha and was the closest thing Haddock had to his dead teammate who had given him his prized Sharingan. The arrangement would continue and Danzo would continue to covertly provide some form of support to the boy through the week. In the end, Uzumaki Naruto would come to Danzo on his own will. Danzo didn't even really need to provide the support in reality, Haddock's attitude would do it for him. Alone, Danzo allowed himself to smirk. It would probably take a few years before the boy was completely under his thumb, but it would happen. After all, who was going to stop it? The farm outside the village. Evening. Naruto, as of the moment, was seething in rage. His day had been crappy since he got up in the training field. First off, Kakashi-sensei had been 3 hours late for their meeting near the bridge, then the guy had made some really lame excuse and had somewhat calmed him down when he mentioned a mission. Naruto hoped that he could get to rescue a princess or bonk the heads of a few bandits, but pulling weeds in a farm was seriously lame. To make matters worse, his leg hurt despite taking the medicine the old man had given him. He had tried to explain himself to Kakashi-sensei, but had been brushed off quickly, and Sakura-chan had bonked him in the head for making excuses. In the end he ended up having to do most of the dirty work at the far end of the field, as Sakura didn't want her new dress to be spoiled by the mud, and Sasuke, being the bastard he was, had declared that he wasn't meant for such lowly jobs. Naruto protested, but was bonked again by Sakura and wisely shut up. She hit hard. Finally, Kakashi-sensei had taken them back to the training field in the evening to check on their abilities and train. Naruto had hoped he'd impress the man and get some cool jutsu. Only to fall in disappointment when he was told that his method of fighting was unrefined and that he needed to work on the basics. Kakashi-sensei had asked him read up on a few books from the academy and practice his taijutsu before vanishing with Sasuke. Naruto had just stomped and gone to Ichiraku, he needed ramen now. Ichiraku stand. Evening. Naruto slurped down his fifth bowl of ramen and patted his stomach in satisfaction, silently thanking Danzo Jiji for the extra money. Smiling, he paid for his food and almost missed the slip he was given with the bill. 15, Isui Market, tramp or behind dumpster. Get out before 7:00 am. Destroy note when done. Naruto grinned a bit, he shredded the note before dumping it. It was nice to know his mom sensei was looking out for him, but he had grown a bit attached to his old apartment. Now he had some of Jiji's money and from the mission today, he could easily repay the landlord and get back to his life, only to discover that he couldn't. The landlord had snatched the money from him the moment he had seen it, but had refused to let Naruto anywhere near the apartment, telling him that everything was booked. Atlas, let me get my stuff. Naruto whined, he still had a few things he could use. Everything you possessed has already been forfeited towards rent payment, the man spoke, this is just enough to cover your penalty, now scram. The door was shut on his face, and Naruto was left alone on the street. I guess I could go there, Naruto thought before he leapt away. The market area was nearly empty at night, so Naruto swiftly entered the by lanes, moved the dumpster and found himself in a small room attached to a shop. It wasn't really bad, there was a futon nearby so he could sleep, and there were a few ration bars and a big canister of water. Naruto took one more dose of his medicine before he opened the futon and collapsed from exhaustion. He never really noticed the masked figure staring at him as it vanished into the darkness underground. Report, Danzo spoke. Uzumaki Naruto is currently availing the facilities at our asset in Isui Market, Danzo-sama, Fuse spoke. Danzo nodded in affirmative, everything was proceeding as he had predicted. Naruto had hoped that the next week would have been better than his first day of being a genin, but it really wasn't. The 3 members of the team would meet on the bridge every day, and Kakashi-sensei could be anywhere between 15 minutes to 5 hours late. They would then be taken on a crappy mission whereby Kakashi-sensei would read his book, Sasuke would glare at something, and Sakura-chan would either be asking Sasuke out on a date or bonking him on the head for disrespecting Sasuke-kun. Naruto's own attempt to ask her out resulted in even more painful bonks on the head. After that, Kakashi-sensei would take them to a field and train them. Which was mostly passing around a ball or making the manji formation around a training dummy. Then Kakashi-sensei would take them around to train them individually. Naruto's attempts to impress him were met with a disappointed look and shake of the head before he was told to work more on the basics before Kakashi would vanish, sometimes with Sasuke. What was the special reason for him being the sensei to this team? Did Hokage Jiji really have some reason for it like Danzo Jiji said? Well, Danzo Jiji didn't lie to him, so there had to be something. So Sasuke-kun, would you like to have some dinner together, I mean it's Saturday night and Sasuke stopped for a moment at her words, truthfully this was annoying him and he was almost near his limit. He needed the power to avenge all those of his clan that fell to Itachi's blade, he wasn't going to waste his time going on dates with girls that didn't even deserve to be shinobi in the first place. He was about to turn around and tell her off a bit more forcefully, but the idiot intervened. Sakura-chan, I wouldn't mind. Thankful for the distraction, Sasuke slunk away. Not now, Naruto. Sakura beat him off before turning, Sasuke-kun had never stopped before when she had asked him out before. Maybe this time he would, and he was gone. And Naruto. She slammed her fist into the idiot's skull again, if he had just not intervened, then Sasuke-kun would have said yes. She would have finally been able to have dinner with her crush, but the idiot's incessant presence had again forced the shy Uchiha to retreat. This was going to end now. Naruto, Sakura dropped him, he looked up to her as she spoke, understand one thing, I am never going to date you or go out with you. I don't even like being around you, but we can't change teams, so I have no choice to tolerate your presence if I want to be with Sasuke-kun. Naruto just looked at her, this wasn't her usual anger. This was cold like the villagers. Did she know? So understand this, you are a nuisance, and the next time you try to ask me out. Sakura paused contemplating what she was about to say, but went ahead with it nonetheless, if it could just get the blonde to stop, then I will complain to Kakashi-sensei and have you taken up for harassment. So if you want to keep that, she gestured to his headband, and not get suspended, then I recommend you never ask me out again. Sakura finally took a long breath, is that understood? Naruto just nodded, satisfied. Sakura went on ahead. If she was fast enough maybe she could catch Sasuke-kun in the street. Naruto got up and dusted his only pair of clothes. It had almost been scary how Sakura-chan had looked at him, but then again this was the damn bastard's fault. Ugh. Naruto finally sighed in frustration, nothing really seemed to be working out for him, so maybe he could take up Danzo Jiji's offer. Kakashi-sensei hadn't really told him anything about his family or taught him any cool jutsu. Making up his choice, Naruto walked to the market again. Next morning. Hamara Bakery. Naruto walked into the normal-looking bakery that was tucked away in a corner near the Hokage Tower. It being Sunday morning meant that there weren't really a lot of people around. "May I help you, sir?" a guy asked from behind the counter. Naruto was a bit conflicted, but images of his life flashed through his head. Honestly, he had been hoping that Hokage Jiji would call him into his office one day and tell him about his parents. He had hoped that Kakashi-sensei would teach him something cool or at least teach him to read the difficult words those books had, maybe he could tell Naruto who his dad was. But nothing of that sort had happened. The few times he had seen Hokage Jiji in the last week nothing had happened, and the one time he had hinted about wanting to talk about the fox with Kakashi-sensei, he had been hushed and then told to never talk about it with anyone. The look on Kakashi-sensei's face had been really scary, and Naruto just somehow knew that saying that he met the fox to that man would get him in big trouble. "Sir," the guy called again, bringing Naruto back into the shop. "Yeah," Naruto spoke. Of all the people he had met, Danzo Jiji had been the only one to actually tell him about who he was, so he would go with him. "I want the village's finest cheese bread." After all, what was the worst that could happen? "I want Konoha's finest cheese bread." With those words, Naruto had made his decision. The decision in turn sealed his fate. The shopkeeper spoke. "I'm afraid that it's still in the oven. Why don't you get to the back and get your pick from the oven?" He opened a door and Naruto followed him into a hallway. The man took a turn and soon Naruto found himself in a dark room. "Hey mister, aren't we going to the OV?" Suddenly darkness took over and Naruto's unconscious body fell on the floor. A figure materialized from the darkness and soon both him and Naruto were gone. Protocol 9 initiated. The shopkeeper spoke into a hidden mic in the room before he closed the door to the room and returned to his covert identity. Deep underground. Protocol 9 initiated. For the first time in years Danzo allowed a small smile to grace his lips. His plan had worked perfectly, everyone had behaved exactly as their psychological profiles had indicated. And now Naruto Uzumaki had come to him. Danzo got up from his seat and looked over to his subordinates. "Tsurumu," he spoke, "take a stock of Naruto Uzumaki's physical attributes, Fu will take the psychological examination, and Ginkgo will check his overall ability as a shinobi. I want a full status report by evening." "Understood, Danzo-sama." Three voices spoke in chorus before the speakers left the room to prepare for their tasks. Danzo himself sat down onto his seat as he waited for his newest project to be presented before him. Naruto woke up a bit groggily, the last thing he remembered was walking with the baker before he suddenly went out. He tried to open his eyes, but found out that he was blindfolded. He tried to move his hands or get up, but his hands and feet had been restrained as well. "What the hell?" Naruto thought, "Where am I? And where's the bread?" "It seems that you have awoken," a familiar voice spoke. "Yeah Jiji," Naruto spoke, glad that his mouth wasn't covered, "can you get me out of all this? I can't see anything." "A necessary precaution," Danzo spoke. "Tsurumu, release his restraints." Soon enough Naruto was able to open his eyes. He was back in the room he had been the last time he met Danzo Jiji. The only difference being that instead of lying on the bed he was now sitting on a chair opposite to the old man. "Sheesh, talk about a welcome," Naruto thought, "but I guess Jiji doesn't want anyone to find us." "Naruto Uzumaki," Danzo spoke, "it seems you have made a decision." Naruto straightened himself. "Yes Jiji, I want to be awesome like my mom, I want to know who my dad was, and I want to be strong. So yes, I want to train under you." "I see," Danzo spoke, "I appreciate your honesty Naruto-san, but before we start, I must tell you that my training is nothing like what has been taught to you in the academy or under Jounin-sensei. My training is harsh and unkind, it will push you beyond the limits of your physical and mental capabilities. I demand complete obedience from you and also require you to absolute secrecy with respect to our training sessions. Keep this in mind." Danzo paused. "I can only train you once you agree to abide by these conditions, so tell me Naruto-san, do you agree?" Naruto gulped as he felt a bead of sweat roll down his neck. Despite how cool the room was, he could tell that Jiji was being serious and that this would be like nothing he had ever experienced before. But isn't he the guy Wo trained mom? Naruto thought, plus like I told Konohamaru, there are no shortcuts. "I understand," Naruto said, "do your worst Jiji Tebeo. I'll show you that I'm gonna be Hokage." "Perfect," Danzo thought, "then you shall be in Tsurumu's care for now. I will be testing your capabilities for today." Remember, you made an oath when you have agreed to train under me, you shall not question why you are being made to do what we tell you, and you will not lie to anything about what you have been asked. Naruto nodded. Danzo then left the room, and Tsurumu instructed him to get on the bed. After Jiji's speech, Naruto had expected many things. He had been expected to be asked to fight against monster. He had expected to be run down to a level wherein he would collapse from fatigue. But he had not expected to be poked and prodded with funny-looking things for over an hour and asked questions about his food, how he trained, how much he trained, and how long he slept hadn't been on his list. Thereafter another guy had come in and started talking to him, and honestly it was the most nerve-wracking talk Naruto had ever had. The guy had started out by asking him simple stuff, but soon enough it had started going to different things. He had been asked to write down difficult words which he was unable to do. Naruto had looked down in shame at his chicken feet squiggles on the paper, but surprisingly, the guy hadn't looked like he had been disappointed in him at all, and had asked him why he had written it like that. Naruto had never had anyone ask why he had been bad at the difficult-looking stuff before, so he had just answered honestly. The words look like they're dancing, I'm just able to figure out a bit of the easy stuff. Naruto spoke. I see, Fu spoke, noting down the developments. Perhaps you could explain this in a little more detail, Uzumaki-san. Naruto beamed. Nobody had ever believed him before. Soon enough, with a few more slightly odd questions later, Naruto was done and directed to another room, wherein a big guy wearing an armor was waiting for him. This time Naruto was made to do the academy techniques. He was easily able to do the Kawarimi and the henge, but the Bushin still evaded him. Naruto-san, Ginkgo spoke, it seems as though you are pushing far too much chakra into the technique. Please lessen the amount of chakra and try again. Naruto smiled a bit, though this guy looked scary. He didn't look at him like he was a disappointment. 5 more tries later, still a dead-looking clone appeared every time the technique was done again. Naruto-san, Ginkgo spoke again, let us use a different approach, this time do not restrict the amount of clones you create. Naruto nodded at him again and did the required hand seals, and the entire room filled with orange. Hundreds of clones filled every inch of the room as Naruto grinned at his success. I see, Ginkgo made a noting on his pad before turning to Naruto, please disperse the technique. We will now be testing your motor skills. Moto what? Naruto thought, but seemed to understand when the guy put down his pad and gestured Naruto to attack. I'm gonna show you how awesome I am, Tabayo. Naruto thought as he leapt into battle. Only to realize how horribly bad he was compared to an Anbu. Ginkgo-san, if that was his name, had proceeded to beat Naruto completely in almost every way imaginable. He asked Naruto to do simple things like throw a punch, a kick, come at him with full speed, throw a bunch of kunai and shuriken and other stuff other kids at the academy did. After each session he would walk to the edge of the room and make another note and come back. What were these guys writing? Naruto-san, Ginkgo spoke, your appraisal is complete, please proceed to the last room. Danzo-sama waits your presence. Naruto nodded and went back to the same room. Danzo Jiji was sitting behind a table and had a serious look on his face. Naruto spoke, I'm done with all the stuff, Jiji. Naruto didn't really know what all that he did in the last few hours meant, but he had promised he would do exactly as Jiji told him. And Naruto Uzumaki never went back on his promise. Believe it. I see, Danzo spoke, please have a seat. Naruto nodded and sat. You are still sleeping in the shop? Danzo asked. Naruto simply nodded in return. Then, Danzo spoke as he took a paper and wrote something on it. Tomorrow after you are done with your team sessions, proceed to the Hokage Tower again. You will ask for a D-rank mission on your own. Danzo paused as he handed over the paper to Naruto. You shall take the mission for cleaning the Kuroki estate. Once you are done, hand this over to the client and do as you are instructed. Naruto nodded again as he accepted the paper. Proto something 9, Naruto thought as he looked onto Danzo Jiji again. Pushing aside the thought, he pocketed the paper. You will be escorted out in the same way you were called in, Danzo spoke. Further instructions will be given after you complete your objective tomorrow. Naruto nodded again. The last thing he saw was Jiji tapping his cane on the ground as darkness consumed him for the second time in the day. The evening, man, Naruto spoke, rubbing his head. He looked around to see he was currently on his team's training field. I didn't even get any bread. The food he had been given during the day had actually been good, but it certainly wasn't ramen by any standards. I at least have enough for 2 bowls, Naruto thought as he walked towards Ichiraku's. His day hadn't gone the way he thought it would. Jiji didn't teach him any cool jutsu or run him into the ground, but he trusted the old man. Despite everything, Naruto had grown to trust him. After all, he was the only guy in the entire village who knew about Naruto's family and had told him about him. Danzo Jiji had trusted him with the information, and so Naruto had also trusted Danzo. Maybe he'd learn who his dad was. Considering his mom had been a jonin, maybe his old man was some cool shinobi too. With those thoughts he walked off. Underground. Danzo's office. Report, Danzo spoke as he skimmed through the files his subordinates had prepared on the boy. Danzo-sama, Tsurumu stepped forward. Subject Naruto Uzumaki is both slightly underweight and lacking in height for someone his age. His chakra coils on the contrary are far more developed and comparable to many seasoned jonin. His muscular structure is presently unbalanced, as his muscles are a bit more developed in some areas, such as his chest, biceps and hamstrings, but most of the other muscle groups are stiff and comparatively underdeveloped. Additionally, his muscles seem highly underdeveloped in comparison to his daily workout schedule, a problem that seems to stem from malnutrition due to constantly eating only ramen for sustenance and an unguided and highly muscle-damaging workout schedule. However, overall muscle strength is high, and his leg muscles seem to be highly developed, even with a lack of nutrition which is apparent. Danzo nodded at her, Tsurumu stepped back and Fu took her position. Subject has a marked IQ of 76, Fu spoke. Further, his ability with reading and writing seems to indicate that he has a mild to medium case of dyslexia, a possible reason as to why he is unable to read or write properly. His ability to act upon logic seems to be stifled, and he seems to not have the ability to process emotions such as anger and hate, a possible indication of MPD, a multiple personality disorder. Danzo spoke, this was certainly a surprise, elaborate Fu. Uzumaki-san has been treated differently since many years, Fu spoke, such behavior in most cases would result in extreme and in many cases often violent reactions, especially from Jinchuriki, as has been seen in the case of Sunagakure's weapon. However, based on my questions, Uzumaki-san was not able to recall many instances from his childhood. There seem to be multiple gaps in his memories. Given the fact that his mind has not been invaded with any mental techniques, it seems that Uzumaki-san's psyche has likely fractured in the past few years, and all his emotions, which seem to resonate with negativity according to the emotion chart, are absorbed inside of a compartment in his brain. The defense mechanism which seems to have been created to retain his sanity, he does not seem to switch over to his other self or having met him at any point of time. However, the other psyche inside him seems to still pollute his brain, given the fact that his mindscape has manifested as a sower when he encountered the Kyuubi inside his body. Danzo stood still as he absorbed the meaning of Fu's report. It was worse than he had expected. The shinobi profession by itself was not one which was known to lend itself to mental health, given the highly grueling missions one encountered as he progressed further and further into the field. Many shinobi often cracked under the constant pressure, and given that few took any form of emotional conditioning courses or even sought the help of psychiatrists, sociopaths like Orochimaru were not uncommon across the continent. But with Naruto Uzumaki, this was a big concern. Emotional control was a key facet of controlling the chakra of any Bijuu, as the Bijuu would push both its chakra and its will throughout the host whenever its chakra was drawn actively. Resisting the Bijuu's will was a key facet to controlling that power, as otherwise the Bijuu would keep its host's mind busy with the flowing emotions to cloud the host's judgment and then keep pushing its own chakra into the system to weaken the seal and attain freedom. Therefore, if Naruto Uzumaki ever needed to be able to use the Kyuubi's power in battle, he would need to have a will harder than iron and a great modicum of control over his emotions. Currently, it seemed that Naruto's mind had dealt with a burden of overwhelming hate and anger in the only way it knew to keep Naruto's sanity intact, by sealing it away in a corner. It was a rather novel solution in the short run, but likely to cause multiple problems in the long run. Firstly, a fractured psyche mean that Naruto was as such operating at a reduced brain capacity, thus a far lower than average IQ, and an apparent inability to completely act in a logical manner. Secondly, it meant that any existing mental health condition would be more difficult to cure, as repairing or rewiring just one part of the brain was going to be far more tedious if one had to constantly weave around the artificial seal Naruto's brain had created. Thirdly, it would mean that the other psyche would, or likely already had developed its own persona and would continue to grow stronger inside his own brain. Perhaps it could even form its own bond to the Yondame's seal and leech off its chakra. In the end, this would result in a battle inside Naruto's own brain, with the end result of either Naruto's current personality defeating his other self and erasing it completely, or the other leeching off the Kyuubi's chakra to defeat the currently dominant persona and possibly setting the Kyuubi free. While the first scenario was more pleasant, it would still leave him with lasting brain damage, and Danzo was unwilling to take a chance which could set the strongest of the tailed beasts free. Perhaps it relates to the seal itself, Danzo thought. As per the notes in Hirizen's office, Minato sealed only the yang half of the fox's chakra inside the boy. Perhaps it is this fundamental imbalance which is keeping that other persona at bay or abetting its creation. Danzo made a mental note to look into it later. He would personally oversee the seal's analysis. This was important, but Danzo needed to hear all the reports. Alright, Danzo spoke as he gestured to Ginko to speak. Naruto-san is fast for his age, Ginko spoke. He is quick on his feet and has an unorthodox method of fighting and has excellent natural instincts. However, all his physical advantages are offset by his roughshod method of fighting. There is little to no flow in how he fights, his attacks are off mark, and his accuracy with weapons is below average, possibly a result of not practicing in the correct manner or practicing unsupervised. He has no habit of forming a strategy before any skirmish and over-relies on his ability as a tactician to come up with ideas while fighting. Other than that, he has no variety in his attacks, his chakra control is barely low genin level, and he wastes a great amount of chakra in doing even the most simple techniques. Lastly, he is able to use the shadow clone technique due to his vast reserves, but the advantage seems to evade him as he uses his clones in battle and fights without any coordination or formation. The intelligence gathering potential of the technique is lost to him as his brain seems to simply block out any additional information his clones can provide him. Danzo nodded at him and pondered over the information. The shadow clone was a technique created by the Nidaime Hokage specifically for one purpose: intelligence gathering. Shadow clones, unlike illusionary clones or solid elemental clones, were entities composed purely of chakra, which made them unique in many ways. The clones themselves retained brain functions similar to that of the original and were capable of using chakra for ninjutsu. The chakra of the clone itself returned to the original once the clone dispersed and carried with it all the memories it had experienced during its existence. This, coupled with the fact that its dispersal left no evidence except for a faint chakra trail, made it nearly perfect for spying and information gathering. Of course, with the advantages came the downsides as well. The technique itself was highly chakra consuming. The minimum threshold of chakra to create a single clone was by itself so high that even an average jonin would find himself staggering after having created over 24 of them. The chakra dispersal into the atmosphere upon a clone dispersing also kept on adding to the costs, as barely a half of the clone's remaining chakra would return to the original upon dispersal, and even that was dependent upon close physical distance. Lastly, the clones themselves were fragile, and even the smallest of scratches would disperse them, making them less optimal than water or earth clones in battle. However, despite its downsides, it was an incredible technique, and Naruto's ability to create multiple clones could very well be utilized to accelerate his speed of learning and put him at par with those considered to be geniuses in the shinobi world. The problem seemed to be that Naruto's brain was blocking the additional input from the clones, but it was something Danzo understood quite well. The human brain was a truly wondrous thing, but as it is, it took over 15 years to completely mature and reach its peak conditioning. Before it could grow completely, it remained rather weak, and a major portion of its processing ability was consumed by formulating its own growth, a reason as to why it seemed to be blocking additional input from Naruto's clones in order to retain its optimal condition. But then again, Naruto's regenerative ability was something his subconscious mind seemed to have ignored. While any other person at his age would go schizophrenic from the multiple inputs an undergrown brain would receive, Naruto's regenerative ability meant that any damage would be healed shortly after it was done. Theoretically, this could even help the boy in growing his neurons and activating different parts of the brain. Therefore, this subconscious block needed to be removed. But for now, Danzo would restrict himself to just 5 clones to keep it safe. There was no need to wait until the boy came of age to utilize this advantage. Danzo let a small smirk creep onto his features. He looked at the detailed reports on his desk. Naruto Uzumaki was a diamond in the rough, or could even be a piece of coal. Danzo did not know what would become of him. Either ways, he had his uses. Naruto frowned as he pulled out another weed from the backyard of an old lady. He hadn't had much except for an apple for breakfast, and even Sakura-chan's sweet voice could get annoying if she kept on repeating lame things all the time. This time though, Kakashi-sensei had divided the entire yard into 3 parts after Naruto had complained about being stuck with the crappiest stuff every time, so he at least had that. Given the fact that he was far more used to doing menial labor, Naruto completed his portion of the yard faster than his teammates, after which he walked over to where Kakashi-sensei was sitting and plopped down in the shade. "You know," Kakashi spoke as Naruto looked up, "if you're done with your portion, you could help your teammates with theirs too." Naruto thought about what Kakashi-sensei said. He really didn't feel like helping Sasuke, and Sakura-chan's words rang in his mind again when he thought about helping her, so Naruto made a decision. "Don't feel like it," Naruto spoke, after all none of them had helped him in the last crappy missions. Kakashi sighed as he turned to see 2 of his students that were still working. The team dynamics of his team were still pretty bad. He would have expected something better, but it seems like Naruto was still being quite bratty, and the attitude of the other 2 certainly wasn't helping. This team really needed to learn to work together. Meh, he'd let them figure it out. Noon, Kakashi-sensei was gone. He had told them to complete a bit of team training, but Sasuke had just scoffed and run off to God knows where. Sakura-chan had gone after him, and after yesterday Naruto knew better than to ask her for lunch anytime for the next few days. He was about to start his own training before the slip Danzo Jiji gave him fell from his pocket, and he remembered what he was supposed to do. Chewing onto the ration bar, Naruto went over to the Hokage tower and this time entered the mission room alone. "What do you want?" the Chunin behind the desk asked as soon as Naruto entered. Though there was no coldness in his eyes, Naruto could see that the guy was annoyed. Naruto spoke, I'm looking for a mission. By yourself? The guy asked. Naruto nodded. Well, he spoke, we have more than enough D ranks for everyone. Though you won't be able to take a few of them without a team, you can have your picks from the table. We've got walking dogs for a retired ninja, helping up sort waste at the junkyard, cleaning the estate of the Kuroki clan, and washing dishes at the local bistro. I'll take the cleaning one, Naruto spoke as the Chunin tossed him a scroll. By the way, Naruto asked, suddenly curious, do I get all the money for this one and it won't get me in trouble with Kakashi-sensei, will it? Submit in the mission report for success and you'll get the cash, the Chunin spoke, though it is a bit rare, genin are allowed to take up jobs in and around the village by themselves if they want some extra pocket money. The gears in Naruto's head shifted wildly, he could earn a lot more even if it meant doing crappy stuff by himself. The report should be in the standard format attached with a scroll, the Chunin spoke, now scram, I've got work to do. Naruto scurried out and ran towards the estate. He almost found himself entering through his tunnel before remembering that he was actually supposed to be here this time. He walked over to the gate and knocked, a guard let him in after seeing the scroll. He was directed towards the bigger mansion on the estate where a pretty lady with black hair was waiting for him. Naruto spoke, I'm Naruto Uzumaki here for my mission and I'm supposed to give you this. Akemi Fushigi took the slip and read it once before it was destroyed immediately with a small Kaiten jutsu. She looked over at the boy. Your mission, she spoke, is to clean the mansion and the surrounding gardens. Once you are done, report to the outhouse on the northern side for further instructions. Naruto nodded to her. Was she also one of Danzo Jiji's? Was he going to be knocked out again? It really felt like crap. Regardless, he walked inside the mansion. It was pretty big and awesome looking, but there weren't really a lot of people milling around. Anyways, he grabbed the cleaning supplies and started. He had cleaned an entire room, grumbling about stupid people with big houses, before he realized something important. There was no Kakashi-sensei around. So there were no stupid rules about clones. Happily, Naruto made his favorite hand seals as over 30 clones materialized. Soon enough they spread throughout the mansion and the garden, cleaning and sweeping as fast as they could. Within an hour it was done, everything went fast when he could use clones. If only Kakashi-sensei would understand. Done with all the crappy cleaning, Naruto started walking over to his old hideout. The pretty lady was waiting for him outside and asked him to go to the kitchen. Naruto walked into the place again, this time officially. Danzo sat behind the table sipping on a cup of green tea. As Naruto Uzumaki walked in, he gestured to the boy to sit and he followed his instructions. Naruto-san, Danzo spoke, it seems that you are done with the cleaning with the main estate. Naruto nodded. Then, Danzo spoke, this building will constitute your living quarters from now on. In exchange for living here on a rent-free basis and in order to not raise any suspicion, you will routinely clean the main building and gardens in the compound for such a privilege. Do you accept this? Naruto just felt his body go numb. He could live here. He could have a home. No, he had one now. Danzo Jiji was awesome to Bayo. Thanks Jiji. Naruto nearly toppled the table as he tackled the Danzo off his seat in a hug. Danzo for his part was pleased. While the overt display of emotions was not befitting of a shinobi, the current actions of the boy signified something important. He had succeeded in winning the boy's trust and it would ensure his obedience. His plan had been successful. Naruto grinned as he formed the seals of his favorite technique for the second time in the day. 10 clones appeared and started running around the place, dusting and cleaning everything they could see. Naruto walked into the kitchen to see that all the cupboards were full of food and that the fridge was packed with milk, eggs and vegetables. He had never seen so much food in his life. For the second time in the day he agreed, Danzo Jiji was awesome. Jiji told him that he was to start training from 5 in the evening every day and then again at 5 in the morning every day again. Plus he had to eat exactly as per the diet that had been given to him. Naruto had been a bit disappointed that he couldn't have ramen as much, but he was told it was a part of training, so he'd do it. Right now Naruto had a bit of time before he had to go to the cupboard and down to train, so he looked around the house. His clones had cleaned one of the bedrooms upstairs and were currently airing an old mattress and a blanket out of the window. There was a nice old bed that he could use at night, but a pity that he didn't find any old clothes. He checked out the cupboard, it was almost big enough to walk into. He'd need to buy some clothes now, hopefully there'd be something orange and cool like his jacket somewhere. But that Naruto walked over to the cabinet under the stairs. His clones had closed off all the windows and doors on the ground floor as per Jiji's instructions so that no one could see him. He didn't want to be late on his first day of training. It was gonna be awesome. Believe it. Naruto climbed down the tunnel, grateful that a rope ladder had been strung along the wall. How did these guys get down before? As he got down he found Ginkgo waiting for him. He was ushered into the same room they had fought in before. Naruto-san, Ginkgo spoke, beginning today we shall be working on your physical conditioning and taijutsu. This will be done twice a week. Twice a week? Naruto thought, but I train every day to Bayo. Now, Ginkgo gestured, wear this vest and strap on these weights as per the diagram, your physical training will commence in 5 minutes. Naruto did as he was instructed, though the vest and weights didn't feel really heavy. This is gonna be easy to Bayo. Now complete 4 sets of 25 push-ups each, no chakra must be utilized. Naruto paled a bit, maybe this wasn't going to be this easy. An hour and a half later, Naruto felt like he had been through hell 7 times. Each and every part of his body felt sore. He was feeling pain on parts of his body that he did not even know existed. Who knew he had been doing push-ups the wrong way? That you had to go all the way down while doing sit-ups? And that you weren't supposed to jump when doing a pull-up? He'd been doing all the stuff wrong. Now he realized just how difficult, or in some cases how easy it was to train. Stretch, Ginkgo commanded, we will be working with your taijutsu stances and movements for the next hour. Naruto groaned, but stood up with determination in his eyes. If this didn't make him Hokage, then he doubted anything else would. An hour later he simply collapsed, his body refused to move even an inch as he saw Danzo Jiji move into the room and speak with Devil Sensei aka Ginkgo. The program we are putting you through Naruto-san, Danzo spoke, is the standard shinobi speed training program of the Leaf Village. This is the same kind of training that made the Yondaime Hokage the fastest shinobi on the continent. Naruto found himself smiling despite how tired he was getting the same training as the Yondaime Hokage. Take that Sasuke team. Now eat as per the provided schedule and rest, Danzo spoke, you are expected to be here by 5 tomorrow morning. But that Jiji was gone. Despite his body's vehement protests, Naruto got up, he took off the vest and the other weights as Ginkgo-sen gave him a weird-looking yellow drink. Naruto chugged it in a single sip, it tasted like sugar and chalk powder. This is all training, Naruto reminded himself. Make sure that you eat as per schedule, Naruto-san, and follow the instructions written in T-scroll once you have recovered. Ginkgo spoke as Naruto nodded. He started feeling a bit better after the drink settled in his stomach and slowly made his way back home. Danzo's office. Danzo-sama, Ginkgo bowed as he entered the office. Report, Danzo spoke, he was eager to know how much the boy could be pushed. Subject Naruto Uzumaki has a slightly higher endurance than we had pegged, Ginkgo spoke, we were able to compress over 5 days of workout into a span of 2 hours after I permitted him to utilize chakra for a few exercises in order to break his muscles. His taijutsu will need major improvements, otherwise he has a high threshold for reacting to pain and his natural instincts could make him a formidable fighting force. I have given him a scroll for a few rudimentary chakra control exercises. Danzo nodded as Ginkgo disappeared, being able to squeeze several days worth of workout into a few hours was highly advantageous. If Tsurumu could confirm that all the muscles in the boy's body had healed by next morning, then it would mean that the entire speed training program could be completed within a span of little over 30 months. 30 months, perhaps a few months more if the boy had to be used for vital missions. Within that time Danzo would have created a speed demon on the same level as the Yondaime Hokage. Training with the fox's chakra could wait until his body was a bit more conditioned, his experience with Kushina had taught him as much. Alone in his office, Danzo smiled openly for the first time in years, things were finally going according to him. Naruto's house. Naruto pulled himself up the ladder, he was able to catch the edge of the trapdoor as he felt a pair of hands hold his arm and help him up. Hey? Naruto thought, was there someone else here? Following the arms, Naruto saw his own self. That's right. He created clones before he went down to train. He was awesome. You look like crap, boss, the clone spoke. Yeah, Naruto spoke, Jiji's a sadist. You guys make the crap Jiji asked me to eat. We tried, the clone spoke gesturing towards the kitchen, but you suck at cooking, so I don't really know if you like it. Naruto walked over to the kitchen and pounced on the food. It was crap. The rice was undercooked and chewy, the eggs were burned, the fish tasted like a dried leaf, and the soup was just hot water and a bunch of badly cut floating vegetables. Nevertheless, Naruto was hungry, and as he was told to eat this much every day as a part of training, he ate it all. I really needed to learn cooking to Bayo, Naruto thought as he ate the chewy rice. He had never really had the ingredients to actually cook, but if he had to eat as per the chart Danzo Jiji gave him, then he really needed to learn how to make all this stuff. Things were easy when he could just eat ramen, but this was training. He bet his mom did just that what he was doing and became awesome, so he'd do the same. Naruto grimaced, next time, remove the bones before eating a fish. Morning. Naruto woke up groggily as he looked at the clock, it was 4:45 a.m. and he really wanted to sleep. But he was supposed to train from 5 in the morning, so he had little choice but to wake up. Creating a clone to go to the kitchen, he brushed his teeth and washed his face before changing and going downstairs. The clone gave him the drink he was supposed to consume before training and dispersed after giving him a mock salute. Naruto looked at the mug, scrunched his nose and downed the entire mug in a single gulp. Yuck, he thought, it tastes like sewage. How the hell was eating crappy stuff going to make him strong was beyond him, but he had to do as Jiji told him. After all, he made a promise. Sighing, he made a few hand seals and 5 clones popped into existence and began running around the house. The original meanwhile walked under the stairs and disappeared. Underground, Naruto stood still, his arms spread wide as Tsurumu poked him around and Gigi stood in the background. "Do you feel any pain?" she asked as she poked him in the bicep with a small rod. "Not really," Naruto spoke, "I mean it's a little sore, but not really painful." She asked him a bunch of other questions before Fu came in and took him to another room. Subject: Naruto Uzumaki's muscles have already healed by over 70% in the last 8 hours, Tsurumu spoke, given the fact that he was given a mixture of sugar, protein and electrolytes immediately after the workout and that he has eaten the prescribed meal last night. The efficiency of his regeneration has increased by 40% and muscle damage is down by 80%. His new muscles are forming in the intended manner and he should be able to use them completely in a few hours. Danzo read through the report. The current healing rate meant that the boy could be trained at the intended pace. Intense physical training sessions, even if done only twice or thrice a week, meant that Uzumaki could fit in 10 sessions that would usually take about 2 weeks into a single week and still have time to cope up with other remedial lessons that had been planned. Coupled with the shadow clone technique, this could very well achieve outstanding results. Unfortunately, that would have to wait. He needed to develop the boy's mental fortitude to a level whereby he could remove the artificial barrier in his brain, which shut out the memories of the clones. It would take months before he could even think about delving into the subject of his shattered psyche and utilize the fox's chakra. But he had to remember that the boy was Haddock's charge, at least formally. This was until Danzo could gather enough support to leverage and take the boy for himself. Therefore, in a way, slow progress was the answer to all questions. Any drastic changes in the boy's personality would be clearly marked by his Jonin teacher, and while Danzo was confident that the boy would not speak by himself about who was training him, but Konoha's T&I division knew how to get information out of anyone. So Danzo would wait. He would train the boy from the shadows until he could step into the light himself. After all, if there was one thing in abundance that Danzo seemed to have, it was time. Meditation was a novel thing for Naruto. He had not really paid much attention to it in the academy, as sitting in one place doing nothing just made him fall asleep. He would rather run laps, work on his accuracy or just spar. Meditation had been boring. That was until Fu-sensei told him he was doing it wrong. He was made to sit in the lotus position, his arms on his knees, and given instructions none of his teachers in the academy gave him. Who knew he had to sit in a particular way and that you were actually supposed to pay attention to things like your breath instead of just sitting around. It was still boring, but Fu-sensei was nicer than Ginkgo-sensei, so Naruto just did as he was told. Pay attention to your breath, Fu spoke, remember, your mind will keep thinking of things, but instead of chasing after those thoughts, focus on your breath. Do this until you are instructed to stop. So Naruto did as he was told. For the first 10 minutes he kept thinking about Raymond, how he was going to beat Sasuke team, and how he would bring a bunch of roses for Sakura-chan, and she'd see how nice he was compared to the jerk. Each time he started thinking, somehow Fu-sensei knew and would tap him on the shoulder, telling him to focus on the breath again. 20 minutes into the exercise, and the flow of thought seemed to slow down, and Naruto felt a tug of near his head. A minute later, and Naruto felt as though his entire body was being pulled. He kept hearing voices in his head, he could see his failures and the mocking jeers on the faces of everyone when he couldn't do anything. He felt really uncomfortable and just wanted to get up and leave. He couldn't take it anymore. Suddenly he felt a hand on his shoulder. Naruto, Danzo spoke, do as Fu says, focus on your breathing. Do not let your thoughts or emotions guide you. You are not to stop. Naruto took a deep breath and tried focusing on it again. Slowly the voices started to fade away and about an hour later he was told that he could open his eyes. He couldn't exactly tell why, but everything felt a bit different than before. It was like he could feel his entire body as it moved and his could feel everything around him in a new way. It felt good. Now, Fu spoke, we will be adding chakra to the exercise. This time instead of focusing on your breath, focus on the chakra within you. Let it flow through your entire body. Naruto nodded and took his position. With his mind a bit clearer he started feeling his chakra like Iruka-sensei had taught him. He was able to feel it as it flowed and directed it like Fu-sensei said. It took many tries, but finally he was able to do it. Now open your eyes, Fu spoke. Naruto did as he was told. He was feeling just like he did when he had meditated, but a million times better. He could see stuff that his eyes just ignored, he could hear the fly across the room, he could smell the remains of tea. He could also sense that there was someone in here other than Fu-sensei and Danzo Jiji. So he sprang to his feet and threw a kunai at the corner of the room. Suddenly the shadows started moving and the kunai was swatted away. Naruto, Fu spoke, stop, Kijibo is an ally. But he was hiding, Naruto pointed out. Under my instructions, Danzo spoke, but how did you know he was there? After all, Kijibo was one of Danzo's best infiltrators. He had been unable to utilize the ranged shadow attacks like other in the Nara clan, but his ability to blend within them made him nearly invisible to the naked eye. Beneath the shadows he was undetectable even to the feared Byakugan, unless the user was aware of him. Naruto scratched the back of his head, I dunno, like I was doing the thing with chakra like Fu-sensei said, and then there was violet stuff in Fu-sensei, yellow stuff in Jiji, and suddenly there was a bit of brown coming from the corner so it seems the Uzumaki blood is still strong Danzo thought. Kushina had not been a very good sensor, but it seems that those genes had been strengthened by his father's sensory abilities. Was I not supposed to do it sense him I mean? Naruto asked. Not exactly, Danzo spoke, have you been able to do it before? Perhaps during your academy chakra tutorials. Naruto just looked down at his feet. Naruto, Danzo spoke with a voice of authority, speak, this is an order. Sarashi-sensei, Naruto fidgeted, wasn't really nice like Fu-sensei, she just told me sit up straight and when I fell asleep I was kicked out for a week. The books had too many big words and then we started doing jutsu so I didn't really try the feeling stuff. So it seems Danzo thought. The boy had never been taught to extend his senses, meaning that his sensory abilities had never been tested. If things had been left as it is, then this ability itself would have receded like an unused muscle, and the village would have been deprived of a sensory shinobi. Another testament to Hiruzen's folly. After all, hereditary abilities were always recessive. If the boy had not been trained in his abilities, as he was still on paper, then the ability would have fizzled out on its own, possibly for generations. But now it had been awakened, and now Danzo had him. It is not something everyone can sense, Danzo spoke, but you spoke of colors as you mentioned everyone, please elaborate. Unbelievable Danzo thought as he read on what the boy had spoken. Not only did he have a sensory ability, but he could even sense the elemental nature of any person in close proximity. The ability was still in its rudimentary stages, given that the boy had not been trained as a sensor, but with training, it could make the boy into a terrifying force on the battlefield. A shame he didn't have the other clan abilities his mother possessed, but Danzo could work with what he had. Report, Danzo spoke as Fu came forward. Subject sensory abilities presently extend to a radius of about 50 meters, Fu spoke, the ability grows weaker thereafter, and he is able to detect signatures which are not concealed. His ability to analyze chakra natures on the other hand, has a limited radius of 4 meters and requires greater concentration. Aside from this we seem to have Atlas scratched the surface of his other psyche, though most of the memories he seems to have recalled are not severe in any form. Although a higher level of guidance is recommended in the future. Danzo nodded as Fu spoke. The boy's records indicated that meditation by itself would be a challenge given his other self in his mind, and if the tension the boy went through in the first stage was any indication, then the memories that were sealed away were likely to have severe implications on his mind, possibly making the boy question his own loyalty to the village. Which was why Danzo had decided to remain present personally for these sessions. Fu had prepared a detailed plan to increase the boy's mental fortitude, but it would require an anchor on which the boy could rely upon, it had to be someone the boy trusted. Naturally, Danzo had volunteered himself for the position. He had wanted to firstly ensure that the boy would remain loyal to the village, and secondly being the only person to accompany the boy into the darkest depths of his mind, he would gain his unquestioned loyalty. Post-training, Naruto looked on as his clones put up a dish of boiled eggs before him along with burnt toast and milk. Scrunching his face he started eating and completed his meal. As he got up from the table he vowed to learn how to cook and to learn it fast. He was just allowed one bowl of ramen in a day and he couldn't live with the crap that his clones cooked. Putting on his clothes he got out of the house, making sure that everything was locked before he went to meet his team. Post-noon, the day has been a day of less crappy missions, Naruto thought as he walked away from the bridge. His team's mission for the day had been to clean a park, they had been done faster than before, and Kakashi-sensei had said that they could take the day off before poofing out. As soon as sensei left Sasuke team had gone away somewhere too, Sakura-chan trailing behind him as Naruto was left alone. He was almost going to start his training before he remembered what Jiji told him, he was not supposed to train on his own and had to follow the plan that they gave him. Well, Naruto thought, maybe I could take a crappy mission myself. Only eating 2 meals at home had caused a considerable dent in all the food Jiji gave him. The clones had wasted a lot of stuff while cooking, apparently getting into a food fight as well. He was out of eggs and really low on flour, plus he really didn't want to ask anyone else for money. But that Naruto walked over to the tower. You again? The Chunin asked as Naruto walked in, didn't your team just complete the park mission? Do you like doing D ranks kid? I need the money, Naruto shrugged, and what I make right now isn't enough to pay the bills. Well, the guy leaned back, his tone became a bit softer as he pulled out a scroll from the pile, since we're in the middle of harvest season, I think I have something that could pay a bit more, but it's a bit too much for just one guy. I handle it to Bayo. Naruto voiced. The Chunin scratched his head. Generally such missions were taken by genin teams, not a single person. But considering the rumors of the boy's ability with clones and the fact that he had somehow managed to clean an entire estate within a day, he could probably give the boy a chance. Then you can take this. You're supposed to help a farmer in a nearby village harvest his crop. It's out of the village walls, so you'll need a pass before going. Naruto took the scroll and pocketed it. He was about to move out before the Chunin called him back. Take this, the Chunin spoke as he threw an envelope to Naruto. He opened it and to his surprise, there was quite a bit of cash inside. It's your payment for yesterday's mission, the Chunin spoke. Good job cleaning the estate, the clients have given a positive feedback. Make sure that you keep it up. Naruto beamed at the praise. He was awesome to Bayo. Thank you Chunin-san. He bowed just like he had seen some guys do before he ran out. Sanjetsu Hamido rubbed his chin. He didn't really hate the boy because of the fox, but he hadn't paid much attention to him either. Nice kid. Outside the village, Naruto jumped from branch to branch as he looked at the map he had been given at the village gate. The farming village wasn't very far away and he was at the given address in under an hour. Just one. The client, a middle-aged man spoke. I was expecting a bunch of you guys. Naruto just narrowed his eyes. Anyways, the man spoke, come at the back kid, we got a lot of work to do. Naruto went to the farm, a sea of golden stalks was seen as far as his eyes could see. We've got to harvest this wheat, the guy spoke, we're not getting much labor from rice country these days, so I had to go with you guys. Now look here. Naruto looked on as the man picked up a scythe and showed him how he was supposed to go about cutting the crop. And when you're done with this much, the man gestured to an area, you tie it up as I showed you and put it in the barn. You got it kid. Naruto nodded. Then let's get to work, the man spoke, my family will be joining us soon. Multi-shadow cone technique. Naruto spoke as 40 clones popped into existence, each holding its own scythe. Get to work boys. Naruto spoke. OSU. All the clones spoke in unison as 10 of them took each side and started working. In little over an hour everything was done. The entire field seemed barren as the clones were pulling up the remaining stumps. Man, the guy spoke, you ninjas really know nifty tricks. Naruto Uzumaki at your service, Naruto spoke up as he grinned. Ikezo Kenta, thanks for the job, the man spoke. Soon enough a woman and a few kids came around with tools. Alright kids, we got work to do so the woman spoke before she pointed to the field and her jaw dropped. Honey. Kenta spoke, we're done, thanks to Uzumaki-san here. He pointed to Naruto. Boss. A clone came running, what do we do with all the stumps? Kenta spoke, just put them near the barn, I'll have the shredder ready for tomorrow. I wasn't really expecting this to be done so fast so I haven't taken it out yet. You got it, Naruto spoke to the clone as it went back and began shouting at the others. The woman and the kids looked on in fascination as copies of the boy in front of them loaded all the stumps. Uzumaki-san, the woman spoke, on behalf of my husband and my family, I convey our highest regards for your action. Thank you very much. Naruto felt his cheeks reddening as he rubbed his head, he wasn't really used to praise, let alone from a pretty lady. Would you care to join us for lunch? She asked, it isn't much, but we would be honored to have you on the table. Sure. Naruto spoke, he was actually hungry and walked with the family to their house. It wasn't anything special, just some plain rice, soup and vegetables with meat. Kenta-san's wife, Shiomi had insisted that he eat more and had served him by the ladleful. You're a really good cook, Naruto spoke, remembering that he needed to buy stuff for his own house. Do you know a place where I could buy eggs and stuff? He was not going to shop in the village now, he had enough experience as it was. We have hens in the farm, Shiori-san spoke, and we'll even give you a discount on the eggs. But for other things I would recommend the ration shop at the north side of the village, Kenta can show you around if you want. Yeah, Kenta spoke, I'll take you to Hibachi's too, you can buy the best meat there, and Kirito and his brothers have the best vegetable farm in the village. After lunch Naruto and Kenta had walked around the village. He took Naruto to the ration shops, the vegetable farms and to the small market in the village. We got trading caravans coming and going from here, Kenta spoke, this is a less used road between Genkai and Hinokakujin, the fire capital, so we don't get much traffic, but we've got merchants coming and going, so you might just snag something nice if you keep coming around. He even introduced Naruto to a tailor, a nice lady who was very happy when he had ordered her to stitch 3 new jackets, trousers and a lot of undershirts. Nai-chan, can all ninjas do it? The lady's young son asked as he pointed to Naruto's clones holding his groceries. Nope, Naruto spoke, but I can, because I'm awesome. The boy had looked at him with starstruck eyes. At the end Naruto had left the village, with about 3 clones trailing behind, holding on to bags and sacks of groceries, vegetables, and in one case goat milk which had been recommended by Shiomi-san. Jumping from tree to tree as his clones trailed behind at a sedated pace, Naruto couldn't help but recap the entire day again and again in his mind. It had felt so different. Kenta-san and his family had been super nice to him, almost everyone in the village had. It had felt so good to be appreciated that Naruto was tempted to just jump and go back. I don't need to be the Hokage. He stopped. I don't need to work for everyone's acknowledgement. He turned. I can have everything I want back there. He ran. You will protect the village with your life. Nice job, keep it up. Naruto stopped again, he felt his face heat up as he remembered. Even if there were stupid people in the village, he had made a promise to Danzo Jiji, and even above that he had made a promise to himself years ago. He was going to be the Hokage. He didn't know how he would do it, but he was. He was going to train with Jiji and become awesome like his mom, and then he was going to surpass her and every other Hokage before him. He was Naruto Uzumaki, and he was going to show it to the world that he was awesome. But that didn't mean he couldn't go out every once in a while. Shopping like he had today had been a load of fun, and he was really not looking to buy stuff the old way again. But that Naruto jumped back to the trees and rushed to the village. He was to train at 5, and he didn't want to be late. Nearby treetops. This is Cat from Patrol Unit 5, the Anbu spoke. Naruto Uzumaki is returning towards the village. But that her job was done. Normally Anbu patrols of the village didn't check up on Genin, who were still technically within Konoha's boundary, but Naruto Uzumaki was a special case and had his own protocol in case his sensei was not around. The kid's ability with clones was actually impressive, but to her it didn't look like he could do much else. Outside the periphery of her vision, a crow made of ink flew off into the sky. Evening, Naruto growled in frustration as he tore off the page from his notebook and threw it into an already overloaded bin. Since the last 1 hour Fu-sensei had been making him write kanji with a brush and it was boring. But Fu-sensei was nice. He didn't call him out for getting anything wrong like everybody else seemed to always do. Perhaps increasing the size might help, Fu spoke, make it as big as the page if you can, but the kanji must be perfectly drawn. Naruto banged his head on the table but obeyed. Maybe this was to help with the dancing letters. 2 months later, stupid Jiji keeps making me do stupid stuff, Naruto mumbled as he read about the history of the village, making me do stupid chakra control and the stupid Kawarimi all the time. When am I going to learn cool jutsu? The past 2 months had made the blonde incredibly frustrated. He had fallen into a routine. To get up, meditate, do chakra control exercises and do sensory stuff with Fu-sensei. Then meet his team and do a crappy mission and team training, then do more crappy missions on his own to get spending money. Then, depending on which day of the week it was, he would either get his ass kicked by Ginkgo-sensei, or Fu-sensei or Surum-sensei would make him do stupid writing, correct his katas or teach him how to throw weapons. All of this while he wasn't taught any cool jutsu. What was worse was that he had spied a bit on Sasuke team today, and Kakashi-sensei was actually teaching him a cool fire jutsu. Sasuke had blown multiple fireballs and scorched 3 of the training stumps before he and Kakashi-sensei had disappeared. Even Sakura-chan had been reading more books and was getting good at dispelling genjutsu. Like the team needed any more techniques, he already had one from what Naruto knew, but he still got a cool jutsu and seemed to be getting even stronger, while Naruto was still stuck doing uncool and stupid stuff which he couldn't even tell anyone about. How am I supposed to be Hokage if no one teaches me the cool stuff? Naruto thought. The only thing that seemed to have actually improved in him were his cooking skills. He was now able to make passable food and wasn't forced to eat crap every day. Meow. Not again, Naruto thought. While his new home was really nice, it had an issue with the animals that came in with the smell of food. Cats were especially troubling as they always found some way inside. Get out. Naruto screamed from the kitchen as the cat ran off, but not before it knocked a vase off the table. Suddenly time seemed to slow down. There were few things in the world that were really precious to Naruto. Of them, he had really valued the vase he proudly kept in his living room. It wasn't much to look at, it was a bit off mark and the coloring was bad, but it was a gift. Suddenly he was in front of the table, with the vase in his hand. Juan Naruto thought as he looked around, when did I move? He had been in the kitchen, screaming at the cat and saw the vase falling. When did he get to the table? When did he get so fast? After standing still for a few moments Naruto grinned. He didn't have cool fire techniques and taijutsu like Sasuke, and he wasn't smart like Sakura-chan and couldn't detect any genjutsu, but he was getting stronger in his own way. Whatever Danzo Jiji was making him do was working. A blonde-haired boy, about 5 years of age, was standing alone in a park. He looked at the other kids playing on the other side. Nobody would come talk to him as their parents had told them that he was a bad boy. He walked to a tree and sat beneath it. He retrieved a thread he had found near the trash can, tied it into a loop and took it in his palms. Maybe if he could make the designs with it like some of the other kids, maybe he could show them that he wasn't a bad boy. He pulled out his forefinger from the loop and tried to copy what Kiriko used to do at the orphanage. But no matter what he did he couldn't make the diamond shape like she had. Giggle. The boy turned to see a pink-haired girl around his age giggle at his failed attempts. Embarrassed at his failures the boy looked away. You are doing it wrong, the girl spoke as she came near him. Didn't your mama tell you how to do it? I don't have a mama, the boy spoke, looking at his feet. Oh, the girl's smile fell as she came near him. Then I'll tell you what my mama told me, okay? You'll teach me? The boy smiled as the girl nodded. They started playing cat's cradle, then they played tag, and soon enough it was evening. This was fun. The boy spoke, hey, wanna be friends? The girl smiled, her first day in the park, and she had already made a friend. Okay, she spoke, I'm Haruno Sakura. Uzumaki Naruto, the boy replied enthusiastically. Soon the pair separated as Sakura's mother came to pick her up and left hurriedly with her daughter in her arms. Sakura-chan. Naruto spoke wistfully as saw his young self wave goodbye to his first friend. Behind him another figure came to light, tapping his cane on the ground as he walked. This is a memory, Danzo spoke, it is your past. Naruto looked down as Jiji spoke. Soon the background started collapsing and it was day again. A young Naruto was seen walking around the park with a big smile painted on his face. He sat on the bench and played with the thread, as if waiting for someone. The bob of pink hair was seen walking into the park again as Naruto and Danzo watched. The boy ran over intent to greet his friend. He had so much fun yesterday and wanted to play again. Hey Sakura-chan. The boy spoke as he raised his hand and waved to her, but instead of returning the greeting, she just shot him a fearful look and scurried away to where the other kids were playing. The young Naruto tried many times, but every time he went over to the other kids they just stopped playing and stared at him until he left. Even Sakura-chan refused to play with him. In the evening as the kids separated the boy finally was able to talk to Sakura-chan as she waited alone by the swings. Sakura-chan. He spoke as he came near her, but she refused to even look at him. It's me. The boy spoke, Naruto. Your friend. The girl flinched a bit as he spoke. Sakura fidgeted, Mama told me you are a bad boy and I shouldn't talk to bad boys or be friends with them. So please. But Sakura-chan, Naruto wailed, he didn't want to lose his first friend, I'm not. Sakura, a stern voice spoke as both kids turned to see her mom come to pick her up, let's go. She shot a pointed look at Naruto before leaving with her daughter. Young Naruto just looked down at the ground, tears falling from his eyes. He had lost his friend. Naruto shot forward to try and hug his younger self, only to pass through everything. Remember, it is a memory, Danzo spoke, it is history, it cannot be changed, only accepted, and with acceptance, it will teach you valuable lessons for the future. Naruto looked at his young self. After that day he had not been allowed to go to the park anymore. He had only met Sakura thereafter at the academy, and by then she had been so different. He had tried to talk to her and be friends again, but she had just kept going after Sasuke. He had then heard that she wanted to date Sasuke so they could be close. That was when he had decided to ask her on a date, maybe if they went on this date thing, then they could be friends again. Sakura-chan had yelled at him when he asked, but at least she talked to him, unlike the other girls at the academy who just looked at him with cold eyes like the villagers before walking away. But Naruto had learned to never give up, so he kept asking her whenever he could. She had to say yes sometime. It seems that this memory is what has laid down your fascination for this girl, Danzo spoke, it is natural after all, someone who is as alone as you were would seek any company he could get. But Naruto tried to speak, his throat felt dry, Sakura-chan I can't give up, until when will you not give up? Danzo asked, if in a few years Uchiha Sasuke were to accept her invitations, what would you do? Naruto looked down. Would you still pursue her, even if she was promised to someone else? Danzo asked, if she was married to someone she desired and was bearing his children would you still pursue her? Would you force her to break her husband's trust? What will you do? But Naruto shook as he tried to form words, all his life he had one dream to beat Sasuke team, show Sakura-chan how awesome he was and become the Hokage. It was all one dream, the mere notion that something out of that would never happen was earth-shattering. Is that what you would order her to do as the Hokage? Danzo asked, to be with you against her own wishes. Is that the kind of Hokage you want to be? I don't know damn it. Naruto screamed, I've always wanted to beat the team, go out with Sakura-chan and take the hat from Jiji. It's supposed to happen. And I'll never give up before it does. Naruto fell to his knees as his rant ended, getting it out felt oddly good. What you have stated, Danzo spoke, is not a singular goal, but three distinct ones which are not dependent on each other in the slightest. Naruto looked up. Defeating Uchiha-san does not mean that the girl would like you, or that you would qualify for the position of Hokage, Danzo spoke, she might desire him for things beyond his shinobi skills, things which you might never possess, simply because you are not the object of her fascination. As for your other goals, there are far stronger shinobi than the Uchiha within the village itself. If anything you would need to be stronger than all of them if you wish to attain the position. Naruto gulped, Jiji was actually making sense. You must accept people change with time, Danzo spoke, the girl on your team today is not the same Sakura Haruno from your memory. She is older, she wants different things in her life than she wanted when she was younger. You must accept this, as chasing after the past to recreate it only brings pain. But Naruto's voice was small, almost pleading. It is like how a person grows up, Danzo spoke, you require different clothes as your body changes and becomes big. Your fighting style changes when you obtain new techniques, Danzo paused, I myself had to completely change my style of fighting as a shinobi when I lost my eye and my arm. I did not give up on being a shinobi, but became a different one than I was when I had both my arms and my eyes. I started taking up more administrative work than before and reduced my field missions. Tell me, does that make you think of me as a coward? No, Naruto spoke. If anything, he thought it made Gigi awesome that he could keep going no matter what. Similarly, accepting change does not make you one, Danzo spoke, accept that she acknowledged you at one point of time, but she no longer does anymore, because no matter what you try, the girl that played with you 7 years ago is never going to come back. Naruto stood still. Also, being with someone specific cannot and rather should never be a goal, Danzo spoke, it was the time to strike the other person may or may not desire it is far too subjective in nature to be desired. Also, if tomorrow Haruno-san decides to quit being a shinobi and declares that she wants someone who is not a ninja, would you quit the program just in order to be with her? No, Naruto spoke, surprised at how fast he had said it himself. Being a ninja was what he was, nothing came before it. Then it defines your priorities, Danzo spoke, you want to be a ninja foremost, so all your efforts must be concentrated in that direction. Nothing comes before it, especially relationships which can drain both your energy and time. Naruto looked on as Gigi spoke. Perhaps this is enough for today, Danzo spoke, he tapped his cane on the ground a few times as the world around them distorted. Soon enough they were back in the root base. Mind walking technique release, Fu spoke, Naruto, take some rest before your evening training. Naruto nodded dumbly before leaving in a haze. A root operative brought a glass of water for Danzo. Danzo let out the breath he had been holding, using the Sharingan to peek into the boy's mind, had proven to be quite draining. Mental penetration was about 15%, Fu spoke. Danzo nodded, he had been hoping to get at least 20% initially, but it seemed that his old body could only take as much. Nevertheless, the mission was successful. Danzo had now gained access to the inner parts of the boy's brain, all that was left was to slowly weaken his other self by walking the boy through some of his more painful memories. Danzo had accompanied the boy to ensure that he would not give in to them and in the process somehow release the fox. It was slow tedious work, but would ultimately give the boy much greater control over the fox without the interference of his other self. And Danzo's guidance would ensure his unquestioned loyalty. Within his mind, Danzo would create the perfect soldier. Moving through the memories would make the boy far more vulnerable, and that was the time to mold him perfectly. It would take time, but Danzo had learned to be patient. After all, he had managed to at least achieve one thing today. The boy would no longer be playing at what Haddock wanted him to. Danzo had little doubt that after today the boy would only remain a formal part of his team, after all what Danzo did state was the actual truth, if slightly distorted. He was meant to be a soldier, a weapon that struck fear into their enemies, not an emotional wreck like the preceding teams that the current Team 7 was modeled after. Naruto sat on the dining table as his clone served him lunch. Kakashi-sensei had given them a week off, and Gigi had told him it was the best time to work on his mind or something. He had been expecting to do more meditation and stuff, but Naruto had certainly not expected that. One moment he, Gigi and Fu-sensei were sitting in a room, and then suddenly him and Gigi were at a park he vaguely remembered. To Naruto, the dream he had screamed at Gigi had been one he felt he always had. It was to always be this way, it was what pushed him out of his bed and let him smile when he slept at night. After today, he found himself questing it a bit. He had wanted to be with Sakura because he wanted his friend back. He had wanted to beat Sasuke because the jerk had everything he had ever wanted. He wanted to be a ninja because he wanted to be acknowledged. He wanted to be the Hokage so that he could show everyone that looked down on him that he wasn't just some punk. But of it all, being a shinobi was what gave him a purpose. It made him what he was, it made him Naruto Uzumaki. It was like Gigi said, Sakura-chan wasn't a small girl who wanted to be friends with him when no one else did. She was now a ninja herself and wanted to be with Sasuke team, not with him. Naruto accepted it. Sasuke team wasn't the best guy around. Kakashi-sensei had shown them hands down how much better he was than all of them put together, and from what Gigi made him read, there were 5 other villages in the world that could rival the Hidden Leaf, all teaming with strong shinobi, who could probably kick the team's ass back and forth with little effort. Beating Sasuke wouldn't mean he was the best. Naruto accepted it. The world was a big place, and there were all kinds of people to meet and techniques to learn. But that Naruto relaxed and started eating. Getting better at cooking meant that the food he was eating was much better tasting than the crap he ate when he started, so he would enjoy it. After all he had to train again in 2 hours, and it was Ginkgo-sensei's turn today evening. 2 weeks later, Naruto sighed as his team presented Tora at the mission's desk for the second time this week. Training with Gigi and all was cool now that Ginkgo-sensei sometimes got serious in their bi-weekly spars, but doing such chores for missions was getting boring pretty fast. Plus, he had to do the crappy stuff by himself too just to get spending money. If nothing then Naruto at least wanted a higher ranked mission just for the pay. He wanted to buy himself a cool sword like Kijibo kept around, but from what the blacksmith outside the village told him it was going to be pricey. Well, Hokage spoke, it seems the Team 7 could use another mission as you are done so early today. Let's see, we have babysitting the counselor's grandson, helping his wife with shopping, cleaning the kennels at the pound. Okage-sama Kakashi spoke, I believe that this team can handle a C-rank mission. You sure Kakashi? Hiruzen Sarutobi raised his eyebrows, it's barely been 3 months since they are out of the academy. Truthfully Kakashi didn't know himself, from what he knew Sasuke was ready, maybe Sakura as well, he wasn't really sure about Naruto though. From what he had understood in his initial assessments, Sasuke was a talented but withdrawn individual who was deeply afflicted with trauma, much like how he had himself been in his younger years. Sakura was like Rin, the talented but hopelessly smitten girl always chasing after the cool guy in the team. Logically it should have meant that Naruto would be like Obito, the blithering but endearing idiot that held the team together, either by constantly engaging Kakashi through his challenges for spars, or constantly trying to woo Rin by his declarations of love. In the end it had been Obito that had truly kept them all together. Naruto's performance in the Bell test indicated many similarities and it had reminded Kakashi of many old memories. But he wasn't. Kakashi had observed that Naruto had become steadily distancing himself from the team since some time now. He had since some time stopped asking Sakura for dates, maybe stepping out of the game for some time after a harsh rejection. His relationship with Sasuke on the other hand was almost non-existent. He still worked well with them, having reduced his complaints about team formations to a minimum, but this variable was offsetting the team a bit too much. Kakashi had assessed that the team would have developed, Naruto and Sasuke could be rivals, even with the apparent gap in their abilities, and connect in a way that could perhaps develop into a friendship. Sakura, as talented as she was, would find a place for herself, and perhaps one day, when they had moved past their psychological traumas, maybe she would succeed in moving the wall that was Sasuke-Uchiha. But nothing of that sort had happened. Team meetings these days were generally strained and missions were completed in near silence. The blonde would leave as soon as he dismissed them, presumably heading for ramen as Kakashi had once seen him do. Sakura would still try to invite Sasuke for an outing, but he rebuffed his attempts just as he always had, or simply ignored her, unless it was for a team exercise. The team was working well together now though, their efficiency had increased quite a bit, but they weren't growing on each other, as Kakashi had hoped they would. Perhaps a change of pace from the regular days would work. This team really needed to pull itself together. Yes Hokage-sama, Kakashi spoke, a routine C rank would work quite well. Alright, Hiruzen obliged, we have a consignment of goods which are being delivered to Genkai and head towards water country. Protect the stock until it reaches the exchange port and return to the village. Shouldn't take more than 2 weeks. We accepted Hokage-sama, Kakashi spoke as he pocketed the scroll and turned to his charges. The caravan leaves tomorrow morning, pack enough for 2 weeks worth of travel and waterproof gear as well. We will meet tomorrow at the gate at 7 in the morning. Naruto's house. Naruto returned to his house and blew a strand of hay out of his hair. Ever since the mission with Kenta, many farmers near the village had started asking for him specifically in their requests, and he had been swamped with work. Not that Naruto minded it, he didn't get really tired as his clones did most of the work, and from what he read, using the technique like that would make his coils grow. Plus he got a lot of extra cash in his hands too, maybe after this mission, he'd even have Kuroki-san make him a nice sword. He made a few clones again before going near the cupboard, it was time for training. Hopefully he'd at least get to make a different kanji today. Underground, Genkai? Danzo asked as Naruto nodded. We're leaving tomorrow, Naruto spoke, it'll take about 2 weeks, that's what Kakashi-sensei said. Very well, Danzo spoke, this was not entirely unexpected, take the scroll on the left, it should cover your instructions for this time. Got it, Naruto spoke, anything else Jiji? No, you are dismissed, Danzo spoke, remember, do not draw attention with the skills you have been taught. Naruto gave him a mock salute before leaving. Alone in his room, Danzo let a frown creep onto his features, generally C ranks, even the routine ones within Fire Country or its immediate vicinity, were generally reserved for genin teams with at least 6 months of experience. The only exception being that the Jounin sensei himself recommended it. It had to suspect something. Not likely, Danzo thought, he had yet to mold the boy outwardly in any manner. Nothing that he had been taught should raise suspicion. The boy himself bore no signs of training aside from the developing muscles and bone density, something anyone could develop with a bit of proper instruction. There was no need to worry yet. He just had to keep a close watch on everything. The evening. Naruto's house. Naruto found himself fidgeting despite having downed 2 cups of tea. He was excited to bayo. It was his first time going out of the village like this, sure he occasionally went to the nearby farming areas recently to help out, but this was new. He'd be going far out there, maybe he'd meet someone cool or pick up a new technique. The possibilities were endless. He soon realized that he was unable to sleep and therefore decided to take a walk. He got out of his house, creating 3 clones to look after the place and prepare for tomorrow as he jumped out of the window into the night. Near the Uchiha district, Naruto jumped around as he noticed that he was near the Uchiha district. Should he pay the team a visit? Nah. However, still curious about the place, he got down from the tree and looked at the gate. From what Jiji made him read, the Uchiha clan had been one of the 2 founding clans that actually made this village along with the Senju. The Senju had slowly diminished and the Uchiha had been going about pretty well until a few years ago when suddenly one of them had gone nuts and killed every ninja within the clan. That nutjob had been Itachi Uchiha, Sasuke's brother. Therefore now the clan was composed only of kids and a few women that maybe managed everything. Sasuke was called as the last Uchiha because firstly he was the only surviving member of the head family and secondly he was the only pure-blooded Uchiha and therefore the only one in there who could awaken the Sharingan he had read about. It was apparently a freaky eye jutsu that would let the team naturally track movements, see through genjutsu and even copy techniques from his opponents. It sounded like a pretty cool thing. From what Jiji told him, this Sharingan was bloodline limit and it was recessive in nature. The chances of it being passed down to kids became even lower if the husband-wife was an outsider. Therefore the team was really important, it was through him that the village hoped to regain the Sharingan. It was all really complicated, but Fu-sensei had made sure he read everything, even with the difficult words. Naruto had been quite saddened when he had learnt about Sasuke and had tried to approach him and talk only to be rebuffed every time. Naruto had known better than to directly ignite conversation by mentioning anything about Itachi or his family, so things had stayed as they were. He just hoped that Sasuke found someone, like he had found Danzo Jiji. Someone the team could trust. Naruto had been so preoccupied with his thoughts that he didn't notice he had bumped into someone. Ah, Naruto spoke, turning his head, I'm sorry. He saw a girl, a little older than him on the ground, the contents of the bag she was holding were strewn everywhere. Kagome had been walking back home, her hands filled with the supplies required for the next day, when she felt as if she had collided with a wall. Tired as she was after an exhausting day of doing menial chores for the women of the Uchiha clan, she fell down, the groceries she was carrying strewn around her. I'm so sorry. She heard a blonde-haired boy speak as he offered her his hand, she took it reluctantly and stood up and dusted herself. If any of the clan's women were to catch her like this, she would probably be yelled at. Done with her dusting, she was about to start picking up her things before she felt the boy tug at her shoulder. Let me help, he spoke as 2 more boys exactly like him appeared as if out of thin air and started picking up everything and packing it back into the bags. It was the first time someone had been so nice to her. Let alone a shinobi. Do you live nearby? The boy asked as she nodded. Great, he spoke, I'll drop it off at your house. She fervently moved her head to deny, coming back late was one thing, but if someone found out that she was offloading her work onto a ninja of the village she would without doubt be punished. Eh? The boy looked, I really don't mind, plus I feel bad about bumping into you too. How about you just take it as my apology? There wasn't much she could do if he put it that way, so she relented. The boy gestured as his copies even took the bag in her hand and began to walk. By the way, he spoke, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, future Hokage at your service. Kagome for her part fidgeted before retrieving a piece of paper from her satchel and showed it to the boy. Kagome, he read before looking at her oddly. She raised her hand and pointed to her lips and then flipped the palm and hoped that he got what she was trying to say. You can't speak? He asked, his eyes widening. She nodded. Oh, he spoke, where do you live? She gestured him to follow. They took a roundabout road to the Uchiha district and stopped before what Naruto assumed was a storage room. He kept the bags back in there, his actions however caught the attention of a woman who was walking nearby. Boy Kagome. The woman shouted, why the heck are you so late? Naruto frowned but kept quiet. And who's the boy? Do you not remember what I told you about fooling around with men like a harlot, have you forgotten your place? This was the time Naruto decided to step in, he didn't know what a harlot was but knew that it wasn't a nice thing from the way the woman spoke. It didn't help that Kagome had fallen down during the woman's rant and looked anything but happy. Pardon me ma'am, Naruto spoke, he tried to speak like Danzo Jiji did, I bumped into her and she fell down, it was my fault, so I decided to help her carry her bags. I'm sorry if I caused any problems. The woman turned to him and narrowed her eyes, it was then that his clones came back and the light from his forehead protector shone under the moon. The woman suddenly took a step back as she realized who the boy was. What was the idiotic girl doing with the Kyuubi brat inside of the compound? She wanted to kick him out this instant, but the boy was a shinobi and Sasuke saw him as teammate, she knew that her days would only get worse if she even lifted a finger against him. Please see to it that nothing of this sort happens again Shinobi-san, she spoke and turned on her heels, you're not excused from your morning duties Kagome, go back to your quarters right now. But that she was gone. Naruto narrowed his eyes at the woman. He kinda understood why people treated him because of the fox, but what did this poor girl do to get treated like that? He then turned to Kagome, who had gotten up and dusting her gown again. Taking a closer look at her now, Naruto could see that it wasn't of a very good quality and seemed pretty worn. Who was she? Kagome came near Naruto and bowed her head. She held out the slip on which she had written sorry to him before trying to run back to her quarters. Trying being the key word as Naruto held her in place. "You okay, Kagome?" Naruto spoke. "That mean lady wasn't nice, you should have totally kicked her ass." Kagome couldn't help but giggle at the boy. "Anyways," Naruto spoke, "I'll walk you home." Kagome nodded and started walking, but her satchel came loose and some of her stuff fell to the ground. She started picking up her things but noticed something. Her brooch was broken. It had been one of her meager possessions, one that she had brought by saving small amounts from the meager wages that the clan afforded her. And now it was broken. Before she knew it, tears sprung from her eyes. Naruto looked at Kagome and noticed what she was looking at. Was that plastic flower that important to her? Was it like the vase he got from the little girl at the farm? He gently put a hand on her shoulder and helped her up and made a clone to pick up her stuff. She then led him to a tin shed, which he assumed was her house, and waved her hand as if to say goodbye and went inside. Naruto felt that he needed to help her, but he didn't know anything except her name, and given his reputation, staying would only increase her troubles. With that, he leapt off and ran back home, but the episode left a bitter taste in his mouth. Who was this girl? Why was the lady so mean to her? Was she also an Uchiha? And what was that he felt when she started crying? Was it chakra? Maybe he'd ask Gigi tomorrow morning. He always seemed to know about everything. Next morning, "That will be enough," Fuse spoke. Naruto meanwhile pulled back his chakra from the surroundings. This sensory stuff was hard. Naruto panted a bit since he was to leave with his team today. Fuse-sensei had let him off a bit early. Before going back home, he decided to talk to Gigi about yesterday. "Kagome in the Uchiha compound?" Danzo asked. The boy nodded in response. "Yeah," Naruto spoke. "Do you know anything about her, Gigi?" "Unfortunately I do not," Danzo spoke, "but why the curiosity?" "Well," Naruto spoke, he knew he had to make a good case as a shinobi before Gigi if he wanted to justify himself. "I was kinda taking a walk outside when I bumped into her, then a lady was super mean to her and she started crying. That was when I felt something off about her." That piqued Danzo's curiosity. "Can you describe what you felt?" Danzo asked. "I don't know," Naruto rubbed his head. "I mean, I can't say for sure it was chakra, but it was something for sure. It just felt a bit off. I can't really say what exactly though." Danzo looked at the boy and contemplated his words. The boy in front of him was a roughshod in the shinobi arts. He was barely passable and had little talent in many areas as far as the shinobi arts were concerned. But there were things about him which no one could question. His natural instincts were at par with that of the apex predators in the animal kingdom, and his sensory ability was not something to be sneezed at either. "Very well then," Danzo spoke, "I shall look in it." Could she be another weapon the Uchiha had planned to use during the coup? Or was he panicking out of nothing? Anyways, he would find out. Naruto got back to his house and opened the trapdoor. He had asked Gigi about how Tsurumu-sensei and other could walk on walls, but he was told that his control was too off to try something like that yet. In the end, a lot of things came down to chakra control. He had once asked Fuse-sensei why that was so important and had been really surprised when he was told everything. Apparently not having enough control didn't mean that he'd just get tired. A technique, as Fuse-sensei told him, had two major parts: building up the chakra in the body and then using it for the technique. Hand signs were used for both these things, and chakra control was what helped with it. Without proper control, with more complex techniques, he'd either not build enough chakra to power the technique, or he could just build too much and it would explode within him if he didn't have everything down properly. He could concentrate too much chakra in one part of his body and make it go boom in a very painful way, or he could lose balance and the technique could explode in his face. The only reason he had been able to use the shadow clone technique without much problem was because the technique was similar to the regular clone technique, which he had spent months practicing and therefore came to him easily, and because the technique took so much chakra that overloading it was next to impossible. At the worst, he'd just get a dead clone that wouldn't really blow up at his face. The risks only increased with the elemental techniques he had read about. He could put too much chakra into a fire technique and cook his throat, drown himself by filling his lungs with water, skewer his windpipe with wind, or zap himself with lighting. Earth was still safe, but he could very well turn everything around him into quicksand and drown inside if no one was around to pull him out, or his body would get so stiff and heavy that he'd be unable to move for hours. It didn't help that Fuse-sensei had said that getting the control at the level of his classmates would only be tougher for him because of the fox. He was told that having two chakras inside of one body by itself would create an imbalance, something which made it very difficult to gain control of chakra. But to Naruto, it didn't matter. It just meant he had to work twice as hard as others to get better at the chakra control stuff. Only if he had someone like Fu-sensei in the academy. He'd have done all the stupid leaf and kunai balancing exercises if it meant he could learn the cool stuff later. It didn't matter much anyways now. Maybe he could find some way to make the lame techniques he knew cooler. The village gate. Naruto arrived 5 minutes before the assigned time to see that Sakura and Sasuke were already standing by the side. The caravans were being loaded by a few merchants, and as usual Kakashi-sensei was nowhere to be seen. Naruto just went to the side and opened the book Fu-sensei gave him. He was supposed to inscribe all the kanji with a pen on the trip and do a lot of boring math too. This sucked. At least Kakashi-sensei was only half an hour late this time, and he actually had a good excuse this time about getting necessary clearances for the mission. But that the team hit the road. This is gonna be exciting, Naruto thought. Kakashi arrived at the gate to a familiar scene. Sasuke was sulking by the side, Sakura hovering near him and Naruto frowning into a book about 10 feet away from them. Curious about what the blonde kept reading, Kakashi decided to take a look. Surprisingly, it had turned out to be basic algebra. At least the kid knew where he was lacking. Perhaps with this mission he would see a change in team dynamics. "Alright team," Kakashi spoke, "take the extended manji formation around the caravan. We're leaving in 15 minutes. Sakura frowned a bit as Sasuke took the farthest position from her when they embarked upon a small ship in a river port near the village. Things were not going as she had planned. She had worked hard, toiling away day and night to ensure that she got the perfect marks in every written exam. She knew that Hinata had been far better than her in Taijutsu, but Sakura absorbed knowledge much faster than anyone else and had been able to snag the title of top kunoichi in her graduating class. She had hoped that it would make Sasuke-kun notice her. After all, if she could show him that she was better than all other stupid girls in the class, then he would go out with her. When she had been placed on the same team as her crush, her happiness knew no bounds. Enduring the idiot was a small price to pay for being on the same team as Sasuke Uchiha. The boy was everything a girl could ask for. He was smart, talented, a prodigy in the arts of shinobi, and he was handsome to boot, a complete package. Placing on his team should have meant they would be closer than they would have at the academy. She could finally talk to him alone, away from the other stupid girls at the academy. They would work as a team, they could perhaps spend some alone time when Kakashi-sensei or Naruto weren't around. Eventually she could break Sasuke-kun out of his shell of shyness, and maybe he would agree to at least share a meal with her. All her dreams had shattered on the day of the stupid bell test. Instead of actually showing Sasuke how skilled she was, she had just ended up being embarrassed at not being able to do anything. Then the idiot Naruto kept interfering whenever she tried to talk to Sasuke alone. There was this one time when she thought she had her chance, and the idiot interfered again. Sakura had made sure he heard it from her. She was not interested in him and would never be. The idiot seemed to have gotten a clue these days and stayed away doing stuff they had done way back in the academy. But that, she had hoped that her efforts would be fruitful, but nothing of that sort happened. Sasuke-kun was just as withdrawn as before, and her requests for dates fell on deaf ears. What made it worse was that she could no longer vent her frustrations in the usual way, i.e. by punching Naruto. Ironically, what should have been a blessing for her had just made her life a bit harder than before. Throughout the academy the idiot had been, begrudgingly, a bright spot, always making one-sided declarations of love and asking her out on dates. Though she never admitted it, it made her feel as if she was worth something. Plus no one ever said anything even if she hit him. He generally did things to deserve it himself, and it relieved her of all the stress she felt whenever Sasuke rejected her. Now that he was gone, she felt lonely. Her group of friends from the academy had dispersed long ago, all the girls making their love for Sasuke known and taking their respective oaths as rivals for his love. None of them even talked to each other after that. The feeling only increased day by day. Her team never fell into the patterns of camaraderie that she had heard from other shinobi. They rarely trained or ate together, they never talked during missions, and as soon as Kakashi-sensei dismissed them, the boys would walk away like they didn't even know each other. Perhaps this mission would change something. She could be with Sasuke-kun when he was not annoyed at having to do menial chores. Maybe she could show him a new genjutsu she was working on. The possibilities were endless. "Alright, we're getting near the inland basin, we'll be near the city in half an hour," the captain of the small ship spoke as Sasuke observed the deckhands adjust the sails. Over the horizon he could see a host of multi-storied structures, indicating that they were getting near the port city of Genkai. This mission is a disappointment, Sasuke thought as he stood on the deck. Getting out of the village he had hoped to test himself against enemy ninja or Atlas bandit or pirates to see how far he had gotten in terms of strength. How farther he needed to go to catch up him. He hoped that the journey in the open sea would be more engaging and that he could at least get a chance to test himself. What if Naruto trained before academy? Sasuke bashing. Thanks for watching my video till the end. If you enjoy this content, then do consider subscribing to my channel and leave a like if you guys need the next part. Comment down, and thanks for watching the video and see you guys in the next video.